TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Harper Reed had always believed in making her own path. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, she'd watched her parents work tirelessly in local small businesses, her father as a mechanic and her mother selling homemade candles at weekend markets. Harper's life changed the moment she discovered a passion for beauty products during her sophomore year at Southern Methodist University. What began as a few carefully curated Instagram posts evolved into the launch of Petal & Glow, a modest online cosmetic shop. Over the next 7 years, Harper expanded Petal & Glow into a chain of 6 storefronts across Dallas and Frisco. She spoke at beauty expos, collaborated with local makeup artists, and built a dedicated following who trusted her taste. But while Harper enjoyed professional success, her personal life felt incomplete until she met Jackson Reed. Jackson, at 30 years old, carried an air of quiet confidence. As the eldest son of the Reeds, one of Houston's most respected families in the yen sao industry, Jackson inherited both privilege and responsibility. His parents, Jonathan and Vivian Reed, had co-founded Azarinist, a company specializing in high-end bird's nest products sold throughout the Gulf Coast. By the time Jackson took over as chief executive, Azarinist employed over 60 people and maintained a sterling reputation. Unlike his outgoing siblings, Jackson was reserved, preferring late nights in his home office to social events. He believed a leader led by example, and that example meant putting the company's needs before personal indulgence. When fate brought Harper and Jackson together at a beauty and lifestyle convention in Austin, the chemistry was undeniable. Harper was moderating a panel on entrepreneurship in beauty, and Jackson had been invited as a guest to speak about family businesses. A handful of attendees remained after the panel ended, and Jackson asked Harper a question about branding in rural markets. She answered with candor and warmth, so Jackson lingered afterward to ask more. Soon, their conversation strayed from marketing strategies to family values, and before they knew it, they had exchanged numbers. Long-distance coffee dates evolved into weekend brunches. Harper flew to Houston, Jackson drove to Dallas, and in between, they texted each other relentlessly about everything from favorite late-night snacks to the best playlists for long drives. 2 months later, Jackson proposed during a sunrise sail on Galveston Bay. Ring in hand and heart in his voice. Harper said yes, without hesitation. They planned a wedding in Dallas that summer, overlooking the uptown skyline from a rooftop venue. Harper wore a simple crepe gown with an illusion neckline. Jackson chose a midnight blue suit. Guests included friends from Harper's Petal & Glow team, Jackson's childhood friends from Houston, and a handful of family members who flew in from around the country. The ceremony was lighthearted, full of laughter, tears, and promises to support each other's dreams. Just days before the honeymoon, Jackson approached Harper with a request that left her momentarily speechless. Over coffee in their sunlit condo, Jackson explained that his mother, Vivian, lived alone in a large, stately home in Houston's Montrose district ever since her husband, Jonathan, passed away about 5 years earlier. Vivian rarely ventured out or socialized. In fact, she spent most days in the same high-backed armchair, scrolling through old photo albums. Jackson worried that if he and Harper moved straight into the Montrose house, Vivian would feel even more isolated now that her only son had married. He offered another idea. Harper could return to Dallas to run Petal & Glow, then spend weekdays with him in Houston, living in a small guest house on the Reed property. On weekends, she could work remotely, and they would all share Sunday dinner together. After a year or so, they could decide whether to buy a place in Houston or Dallas. Harper absorbed Jackson's proposal quietly. On one hand, she relished the thought of combining her life with Jackson's, spending time with his mother, and overseeing Azarinist's marketing arm. On the other hand, Petal & Glow was her dream come true. She worried that abandoning Dallas entirely would mean sacrificing the momentum she had built over 7 years. She also wondered how she would adjust to spending more time with Vivian, who seemed introverted and set in her ways. That evening, Harper flew back to Dallas in a storm of conflicting emotions. She called her best friend, Maya Nguyen, her fellow SMU graduate and co-founder of a small event planning agency, on the flight. Maya knew Harper better than anyone. "Harper, you've worked so hard to get Petal and Glow off the ground," Maya said gently as turbulence rattled the plane over Lake Louisville. "Are you sure you want to uproot everything now?" Harper sighed and leaned her head back against the seat. "I love Jackson. I want to be with him. But Petal and Glow is everything I've poured my heart into. If I left Dallas, I'd have to trust my staff completely to run 6 stores. And I'm not sure I can do that." Maya replied thoughtfully, "What if you kept a flat in Dallas to check in? Maybe you can compromise, spend weekdays in Houston, but rotate visits back to Dallas. Technology now lets you manage a business remotely to some extent." Harper pressed her lips together. "That could work. But I don't want to let my customers or employees down. What if things go south in Dallas without me around? The market's competitive. Then show them you're still in charge. Just from a different zip code," Maya encouraged. "You can fly back every other weekend. And if you really need to, hire a district manager." Harper exhaled, feeling a small measure of clarity at Maya's words. 2 days later, back in Houston's mild summer heat, Harper and Jackson visited Vivian's Montrose home. It was a grand old Victorian with peeling paint around the windows, a wraparound porch, and centuries-old live oaks shading the front lawn. Harper had never set foot in that house. But as they drove up the winding driveway, she felt a pang of nervous anticipation. Vivian, a graceful woman in a well-tailored blouse and silk scarf, opened the door before Jackson even knocked. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, and she wore reading glasses perched on her nose. Her smile was warm but subdued, as though Harper's sudden appearance was both welcome and surprising. "Jackson, darling, and you must be Harper," Vivian said, extending a slender hand for Harper to shake. Harper took it, feeling delicate warmth in the handshake. "Thank you so much for having me, Ms. Reed." Vivian smiled. "Please call me Vivian. I'm delighted to meet you." She stepped aside to allow them in. The foyer was furnished with antique oak furniture, family photographs lining the walls, and a grand staircase curving up to the second floor. Harper noticed a framed portrait of a younger Jonathan Reed beside the staircase. They spent the next hour touring the house. Vivian showed Harper her late husband's study, a room lined with mahogany bookshelves and scattered ledger books. She pointed out where she tended a small indoor garden of orchids and where she kept her knitting supplies. "Jackson has been terribly busy with Azurenist," Vivian explained. "He insisted I needed company, so I suppose I'll be seeing quite a lot of you now that you two are wed." Harper nodded. "I look forward to spending time with you, Vivian. I know we'll get along well." After tea in the sunroom, Jackson suggested they visit the guest house around back, a small, brick cottage with 2 bedrooms and a kitchenette. Harper stepped inside and found it modest but comfortable, warm hardwood floors, a simple kitchenette with stainless steel appliances, and 2 bedrooms decorated in soft neutrals. Outside, a wisteria vine curled around the porch railing. The air smelled faintly of lavender. "This will be mine during the week," Harper said, turning to Jackson. "I can manage my Dallas team remotely from here. I'll fly back on alternate weekends." Jackson smiled and wrapped his arm around her shoulder. "Thank you for being so understanding. Petal and Glow matters to me because it matters to you. We'll figure out a schedule that keeps both our dreams alive." Vivian pursed her lips in approval. "I'm glad you're both willing to make this work. My home will feel more lively again." That night, as Harper lay in the guest house bedroom listening to distant crickets, she felt a fluttering mix of excitement and guilt. She stared at the ceiling, recalling Jackson's earnest face, how delighted he looked that evening. It was her first time living in Houston. She thought of the bright Dallas skyline, the early mornings at Petal and Glow, the store managers who relied on her presence. Now, whether she liked it or not, Houston would be home for most weekdays. Over the next week, Harper coordinated a detailed plan. She hired a trusted district manager named Rosa Delgado to oversee Petal and Glow's 6 stores. Rosa was a former protege who understood Harper's vision perfectly. They implemented online check-ins. Harper would log in via video call each morning at 9 a.m. sharp to communicate with Rosa and review sales reports. On Tuesdays, Harper reserved a flight back to Dallas for a midday visit. Her calendar was a delicate mosaic of live-stream tutorials, product launches, and Houston-based meetings with Azarinist's marketing team. Every Friday evening, she flew back to Houston to spend the weekend with Jackson and Vivian. By the end of Harper's first month in Houston, she learned how to maintain her Dallas empire with virtual hands. She also discovered how quickly life could shift. One afternoon, a new shade of tinted lip balm launched to immediate success, her Instagram followers spiked, and Petal and Glow was featured in a regional beauty magazine. She celebrated by texting Jackson, "Success. Rosa nailed the in-store demo today." His reply came back almost instantly, "And I set up negotiations with a new distributor for Azarinist. We're both on fire." That evening, at dinner in the main house's cozy dining room, Vivian made her first move to bridge the gap between daughter and mother-in-law. "Harper, dear, I cooked your favorite dish, lemongrass chicken with jasmine rice. I know you've been missing Dallas flavors." Harper looked across the table, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Vivian. It means a lot." Jackson silently lifted his water glass to toast, to new beginnings and working together, even from miles apart. Vivian and Harper clinked glasses. Miles, who had flown back to Houston for a weekend visit, chimed in, "Honestly, it's cool to see my sister-in-law and brother juggle 2 cities, like a real-life superhero duo." Harper laughed. "It doesn't always feel like a superpower, but we're trying." Dinner conversation drifted to shared memories. Jackson recounted childhood summer days spent fishing in Galveston Bay with Vivian and Jonathan. Harper shared stories of bootstrapping Petal and Glow in a cramped Dallas apartment, where her first test batch lip gloss had spilled all over her floor. Vivian sipped her tea, eyes soft as she watched Harper animatedly describing her first pop-up market stall. For the first time, Harper felt that she truly belonged in this Houston household. Late that night, after everyone had gone upstairs, Harper lingered in the kitchen, leaning against the countertop. Vivian joined her, retrieving 2 mugs of peppermint tea from the cupboard. "Harper," Vivian said quietly, "thank you for making an effort. I know you had to sacrifice a lot to be here." Harper hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Vivian, I want you to know I love Jackson very much. Petal and Glow will always be my baby, but this family, your family, means so much to me too." Vivian set the mugs down and put a hand on Harper's shoulder. "I see that, dear. And I appreciate how hard you're working to keep both your dream and our family strong." Harper let out a small laugh. "It's definitely an adjustment. I still joke that Alexa in the guest house knows more about Dallas sales numbers than I do these days." They both chuckled, and Vivian lifted her mug. "To balancing dreams, families, and everything in between." Harper clinked her mug against Vivian's. "To new beginnings." In that soft glow of the kitchen light, Harper felt both the weight and the wonder of what she had chosen. The next morning, she would log in to her Dallas headquarters, greet Rosa on video, and fine-tune plans for a new lipstick release. By evening, she'd fly back to Houston, share stories with Jackson and Vivian, and toast to the day's successes. The path was set, however winding it might become. And Harper was determined to walk it with equal parts determination and grace, because sometimes love asks us to build bridges across miles, to show up in new ways, and to trust that home can be a feeling we carry between 2 places rather than a single address. The morning sunlight filtered through sheer curtains in the Montrose house, casting warm patches across the living room's oriental rug. Harper Reed emerged from the guest house, yawning as she stretched her arms above her head. She had just finished a virtual brand strategy meeting with Rosa Delgado, her district manager back in Dallas. and was eager to savor a quiet moment before the day's chaos began. As she stepped into the kitchen, she spotted Vivian Reed already seated at the breakfast table, sipping a cup of Darjeeling tea and scrolling through an old family photo album. "Good morning, Vivian," Harper said cheerfully, setting her own coffee mug down on the marble countertop. "Did you rest well?" Vivian looked up, her expression polite but reserved. "Morning, dear. I slept fine. Are you up early to check sales numbers?" Harper nodded. "Yes. I caught the closing report from Dallas. Sales at the Frisco location jumped 15% last night after the new lipstick launch." Rosa credits the in-store demonstrations. Vivian set her phone aside and focused on Harper. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Still, I wish you didn't have to stretch yourself so thin. Running Petal and Glow from Houston while managing your new duties here, that's a lot." Harper smiled, brushing back a strand of her dark brown hair. "I appreciate your concern, Vivian, but I've got it under control. Rosa is terrific. She's been with me since the beginning. I check in every morning, and if anything urgent." Before Harper could finish, a knock sounded on the front door. Vivian rose from her seat and went to answer it. Harper followed, curious. As Vivian opened the door to reveal a delivery driver holding 3 large shopping bags emblazoned with Couture Haven, Harper's eyes widened. "Oh," she said softly. "That must be the dresses I ordered for next week's Petal and Glow VIP event in Dallas." Vivian's lips pressed into a tight line. "Dresses or not, Harper, this is the 4th shipment this week. You're spending a small fortune." Harper took 2 of the bags from the driver, offering a gracious smile. "Thank you, and yes, I know it's a lot. But these are limited edition gowns from a local designer in Dallas. They're critical for the live-streamed runway at our VIP launch. The audience expects something fresh, something exclusive." Vivian folded her arms. "I still don't understand. Your fashion needs keep escalating. When I was young, a few well-chosen staples lasted for years. A single gown for a special occasion. Not 3 showstoppers in a matter of days." Harper inhaled slowly, steadying her tone. "Times and industries change, Vivian. In the beauty world, visuals matter, especially online. If I want to maintain Petal and Glow's image as a premium brand, I can't reuse last season's pieces. Consistency is crucial." Vivian tapped her foot on the porch threshold. "And consistency is also about living within your means. I see monthly shipping bills that could fund a small charity. So forgive me if I can't help worrying." Just then, Jackson walked out of the main house, dressed in his usual crisp Oxford shirt and slacks. He glanced at the shopping bags and arched a brow. "Another Couture Haven order?" Harper smiled tightly. "Yes. I'll drop them off at the Frisco store on my way back to Dallas." She turned to Vivian. "I promise this is the last big shipment for 2 weeks." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "I'll believe that when I see it. I just hope Piggy Bank Management 101 is on Rosa's syllabus." Jackson sighed and placed a hand on Vivian's shoulder. "Mom, let's not make today a battle over dresses. Harper's doing what she needs to do. It's her brand." Vivian withdrew slightly, her gaze shifting to the street beyond the gated property. "I'm not attacking her brand. I just think it's excessive." Harper, sensing the rising tension, offered a conciliatory nod. "I understand. I genuinely appreciate everything you're doing to help me settle in. Running 2 businesses remotely requires some flexibility in spending, but I don't want you to feel like I'm wasting resources." Vivian studied Harper's face for a moment, then exhaled a soft sigh. "All right, I'll try to trust your judgment. But know that I'm watching the household expenses carefully." Jackson guided Harper inside, and the 3 of them moved to the dining table. For a moment, the morning air felt thick with unspoken worries. Harper scrolled through her phone, double-checking which dresses were in each bag. Vivian sipped her tea, absently fingering the edge of her silk scarf. Jackson cleared his throat. "We have a luncheon with the Azarinus board at noon," he reminded them. "Harper, you mentioned you had to squeeze in a video conference with Rosa beforehand?" Harper nodded and took a seat. "Yes, 9:30 a.m. Dallas time, which is 10:30 here. If I can wrap that up by 11, I'll have time to drop the dresses off, then I'll be back for lunch here. Vivian folded her arms across her chest. I'll have Eggs Benedict ready for you when you get back. Jackson glanced at Vivian, then at Harper. Sound like a plan? Harper lifted her mug in gratitude. Perfect.
Thank you, Vivian.
Once Harper excused herself to retrieve her laptop, Vivian stood abruptly. Jackson, can we talk? Harper nodded at Jackson, nodded at Vivian, then slipped into the guest house. As the door clicked shut behind her, she heard Vivian's voice drop to a hushed but serious tone. Jackson watched his mother pace the tile floor of the sunlit kitchen, arms crossed. Mom? Vivian turned, expression inscrutable. I'm worried about her. She's in over her head, 2 businesses, 2 cities. And those shopping sprees? I can't see past it. Jackson leaned against the island countertop. She's maintained Petal and Glow brilliantly. Her team in Dallas manages day-to-day. Residents of Dallas adore her. She's disciplined, organized. She knows exactly what she's doing. Vivian blinked, staring at Jackson as if assessing whether his words rang true. I just remember your father cautioning us that marrying someone who runs a retail business can be unpredictable. Her income depends on trends and seasonality. What if the Dallas market shifts? Jackson's jaw clenched. Mom, Harper's built a loyal following. Her brand is solid. She's not some rookie influencer. And you saw the sales reports. Petal and Glow's revenue is up 100% year over year. Vivian's shoulders sagged slightly.
Fine.
I trust your judgment mostly. I just don't want her burning out. She paused, choosing her words. And if she wants to keep hosting shopping sprees, I'd rather she not do it here on my dime. Jackson gave a small, wry smile. Understood. I'll keep an eye on things. He reached out and touched Vivian's arm. It'll be okay, Mom. Meanwhile, in the guesthouse office, Harper logged onto her laptop and launched Zoom at precisely 10:30 a.m. A grid view popped up. Rosa Delgado, smiling in front of a display of lip gloss testers, Harper's Dallas store manager, Gabe, and Rosa's assistant, Janelle. Harper squared her shoulders and returned a bright smile. Good morning, everyone, Harper said. Let's brief through the 5-day sales forecast, and then I'd like updates on our new product rollouts. As they plunged into spreadsheets, charts, and influencer schedules, Harper's mind replayed the tension she'd just witnessed between Jackson and Vivian. She knew the conflict was far from resolved. After 45 minutes, Jasmine from social media marketing popped in to announce that Petal and Glow's TikTok video featuring the new mattifying foundation had gone viral overnight, netting 10,000 new followers in under 12 hours. The conversation lit up with excitement, and Harper couldn't help but smile. This was why she did what she did. She completed the final action items list, assured Rosa she'd be back in Dallas mode by lunchtime tomorrow, and logged off. Once her last Zoom square faded to black, Harper packed her laptop and donned a lightweight trench coat before stepping outside. She knew she had exactly 45 minutes to drop the couture Haven bags at the Frisco store. As she slid into her sleek white Tesla, she envisioned Dallas, its bustling boutique-lined streets, the sun glinting off glass storefronts, and the hum of customers lining up for samples. The 90-mile drive north on I-45 took just under an hour in the mid-morning traffic. As Dallas's skyline drew closer, Harper reflected on the tension she had just left behind. The entire morning's exchange with Vivian still prickled at her. She realized that while Vivian aimed to protect her, and by extension, the family's finances, the constant friction over wardrobe budgets and household expenses risked undermining their fragile new arrangement. Pulling into the Frisco Petal and Glow location, Harper executed a quick U-turn and found a parking spot directly in front of the expansive storefront, its floor-to-ceiling windows displaying mannequins draped in neutral-toned ensembles. She entered the store through the staff entrance, passing by neatly arranged shelves of highlighter palettes, shelves of pressed powders, and bins of neatly lined concealers.
Rosa,
smartly dressed in a black blouse and tailored jeans, greeted Harper with a beaming smile as soon as she saw her. Harper, the gowns arrived just in time. We've hung them on the display racks, Rosa said, guiding Harper toward a corner where 3 gowns, ivory silk, deep emerald, and midnight plum, were ready for staff to showcase during tomorrow's live stream. Each bore minute details of hand-stitched beading along the collarbone. "They're gorgeous, Rosa. Send me the final cost breakdown and I'll handle the invoice remotely," Harper replied. She allowed herself a fleeting moment to admire the gown's craftsmanship. "Thank you for arranging everything."
Rosa nodded.
"Of course. The VIP clients will love the exclusive pieces. We're ready to do a sneak peek TikTok video tonight, too." Harper felt a surge of pride. "Perfect. I'll log on from the guest house tonight to watch it." She retrieved a sleek envelope from her tote and handed it to Rosa. "Here's the invoice for Couture Haven, plus a little bonus for the team's hard work." Rosa's eyes widened. "Thank you, Harper. We'll make every cent count, promise." Harper smiled, patted Rosa's shoulder, then returned to her Tesla for the drive back to Houston. The time on her phone read 11:15 a.m. She had just enough time to breeze through the same stretch of I-45 southbound to catch her noon luncheon with the Azarinist board. As she approached the edges of Houston, HD-quality billboards advertising the latest bird's nest gelato from Azarinist greeted her. She realized that while she had spent the morning churning through Petal and Glow's expanding metrics, Jackson was simultaneously fielding negotiations on Azarinist's behalf. The synergy of 2 family enterprises, Beauty and Bird's Nest, kept the Reed household humming across 2 cities. Pulling into the Montrose driveway once more, Harper felt a pang of gratitude and anxiety collide. The lemongrass chicken on the dining table smelled like back-home comfort, but the lingering tension with Vivian threatened to overshadow the warmth. "Darling, you made good time," Jackson greeted her, stepping out of the kitchen wearing a crisp white shirt. In one hand, he held a half-empty manila folder of Azarinist contracts. "Shall we?" He guided Harper toward the dining table, where Vivian had laid out a spread, fragrant jasmine rice, tender lemongrass chicken, steamed bok choy, and a small plate of fresh papaya slices. Harper seated herself, scooping warm jasmine rice onto her plate. Despite the simmering disagreements, this ritual still felt like home. She took a bite of lemongrass chicken, savoring its tangy zest, and exhaled a contented sigh. Vivian surveyed Harper from across the table. "You're doing a lot. When I first sent you those photo albums to look at, I worried I'd come off as outdated. But you took it in stride." Harper offered a genuine smile. "I love seeing old photos of Jonathan and you. It helps me feel connected to this side of the family. I want to prove that I can both run Petal and Glow and be part of yours." Jackson swirled water in his glass. "It's a team effort. Mom's been generous enough to let us juggle 2 locations. I appreciate you making it work." Vivian dipped a chopstick into bok choy sauce. "Just try to keep visits to the Couture Haven site. No more random shipments landed on my doorstep." Harper laughed, relieved by the return of banter. "Understood. Next one goes directly to the Dallas office." Harper exchanged small talk about Azarinist's new floral infusion, Bird's Nest line, featuring rose water and jasmine extracts, while Jackson listened intently, weighing every phrase. Vivian occasionally interjected with a pointed comment. "Make sure you're not overproducing. Last thing we need is inventory sitting around." By the time dessert plates were cleared, the tension in the air had partially subsided. Harper stood and placed her dishes in the sink. "I have to finish preparing for tomorrow's live stream in Dallas. I'll be on Zoom tonight around 7. If you'd like to tune in and see the final run-through." Vivian nodded slowly. "I might. I've never watched a fashion live stream, but it's good to see how your world works." Jackson smiled in relief. "I'll be there too. I want to send a small gift to your Dallas team to celebrate the lipstick success." Vivian's eyes softened as she looked at Harper. "You're doing well, dear. Just remember, know when to stand your ground and when to step back." Harper placed a hand on Vivian's shoulder. "Thank you. I'm learning, slowly but surely." Later, as Harper carried her laptop up to the guest house, she realized that the friction over fashion and expenses was not just about money. It was a clash of values. Her entrepreneurial drive versus Vivian's old-school frugality. She understood that when two people come from vastly different backgrounds, one raised in a bustling Dallas retail environment, the other in a more traditional Houston family, misunderstandings were inevitable. Yet, she also sensed that if she and Vivian could learn to see where each other was coming from, they might bridge the gap. Harper's fingertips brushed the guest house door as she entered. She glanced at the small porch light. In a few hours, she would log on to her Dallas headquarters, connect with Rosa and the rest of her Petal and Glow team, and watch the live stream rehearsal that would be broadcast nationwide. But for now, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, savoring the faint scent of lavender from Vivian's outdoor garden. She reminded herself that balancing work, relationships, and family would never be easy, but if she could keep her heart open, this house on Montrose Boulevard could become her second home. As she settled at her desk, Harper tapped her laptop's power button and stared at the screen's glow. The next 4 hours would be spent running through lighting angles, camera cues, and product descriptions. Tomorrow, when the feed went live, every viewer scrolling across their phone would see her new limited edition collection, gowns and cosmetics that were the epitome of Petal and Glow's promise. Refined elegance that made anyone feel luminous. But first, she had to navigate the present tension. Even though she was grateful for the support she'd received from Vivian and Jackson, Harper knew she couldn't let underlying resentments fester. After tonight's live stream rehearsal, she planned to invite Vivian over for quick coffee in the guest house. They might talk about the budgeting spreadsheet Vivian had asked Harper to review last week, or simply share a quiet moment away from the bustle of stores and board meetings. Whatever the outcome, Harper reminded herself she was telling her own story, one where a woman could pursue her dreams and build a family, forging a new path that blended Dallas ambition with Houston heart. And as she prepped her camera angles and cued music for the live stream, she felt a surge of confidence. She would find a way to honor both worlds. Tomorrow, the spotlight would be on Petal and Glow. But right now, the real challenge was finding harmony under one roof, even if that roof sometimes felt too small for two very different approaches to life. And so, with a final adjustment of the ring light, Harper dove into her work, determined to strike that delicate balance between financial responsibility, creative vision, and the needs of a new Houston family that she was now very much a part of. Frankly, Vivian Reed never expected to deal with house guests at this stage of her life. She'd spent the last 5 years in the Montrose home she and her late husband, Jonathan, had lovingly restored. Since Jonathan's passing, she'd grown accustomed to a quiet routine, morning tea, tending to her orchid collection, and occasionally telephoning old friends.
Now,
The prospect of adding another person to her carefully managed household felt jarring. It all started one evening just after dinner. Jackson had stepped into his home office to finalize a supplier contract for Azurenist. Harper had retreated to the guest house to prep for a late-night video conference with Rosa Delgado in Dallas. That left Vivian alone in the spacious dining room, gazing out French doors onto the patio where the wisteria vines clung precariously to the brick facade. Her reverie was interrupted by the faint sound of footsteps on the front porch and a tentative knock at the door. Setting down her china teacup, Vivian rose to answer. She found herself looking at a young woman, Zoe Parker, standing in the doorway, holding a small overnight bag in one hand and a box of assorted groceries in the other. "Ms. Reed," Zoe began, her voice soft and measured. She had dark brown hair pulled back into a low ponytail and wore a simple chambray shirt and black jeans, an outfit that spoke of frugality rather than fashion. "My name is Zoe Parker. I'm a close friend of Miles's. He mentioned that my family lost our home in Beaumont after the hurricane and that you might allow me to stay here temporarily." Vivian studied the young woman. Miles, her youngest grandson, had indeed mentioned a friend in need. But Vivian had only assumed Miles would sublease a guest room at his dorm in Austin. She hadn't expected Zoe to show up at her doorstep. Jackson, sensing the pause, stepped out from the office. "Mom, Zoe's friend from college. She's in a bit of a bind. Family home flooded out." Jackson's exact words were, "She needs a place to land." Vivian nodded slowly. "Of course, Jackson. You know I want to help.
Come in, Zoe.
Let's figure out where you'll stay. She glanced at the groceries. Is that everything you could carry? Zoe stepped inside, gingerly placing the bags on a marble sideboard. I appreciate it, Ms. Reed. I know it's a lot to ask on short notice. Call me Vivian, she said, stepping aside to let Zoe in. Your room is just down the hall. Let's get you settled. The guest bedroom wasn't exactly luxurious. It featured a full-size bed, a cedar chest, and a small writing desk. Vivian had refurbished it years ago as a quiet retreat during hurricane season. Jackson had praised the room's simplicity when he was growing up, saying it always felt like a calm sanctuary. Tonight, it would also be Zoe's refuge. Once Zoe was settled, Vivian invited her to stay for a cup of chamomile tea in the sunroom. The late April air was mild, and the wisteria outside was in full bloom, releasing a delicate floral fragrance. Vivian handed Zoe a mug of tea, then asked gently, So, how long do you anticipate staying here? Zoe clasped her mug with both hands. I'm finishing my final semester at UT Austin. Only a few weeks until graduation. I just need a place to stay until I can get on my feet. Miles told me the Reed family is known for being generous. I'd work to help out wherever I can. That's thoughtful, but unnecessary, Vivian replied. All I ask is that you respect the house and keep up with basic chores. Do you handle shopping, cooking? Things like that. Zoe smiled appreciatively. Absolutely. I can do groceries, meal prep, whatever. Vivian nodded. Very well. Beneath her composed exterior, however, a small knot of unease formed in Vivian's stomach. She was not accustomed to house guests beyond the occasional cousin visiting from New York. But she reminded herself to be charitable after all. She'd once given a home to Jackson and Miles when they were children. Get some rest, Zoe. Tomorrow, breakfast is at 8. Zoe returned a modest nod. Thank you, Vivian. The next morning, Vivian rose at 6 a.m., slipped into a lightweight cardigan and cotton slacks, and descended the main staircase. By the time she reached the kitchen, Zoe was already there, unpacking a small grocery haul on the countertop. 2 cartons of almond milk, a loaf of whole-grain bread, a carton of free-range eggs, a container of cherry tomatoes, and a few apples. Vivian's gaze flickered to the bags. She expected basic items, but Zoe had spent exactly $35.11. That precise total stuck out like a sore thumb. You went to the grocery store already? Vivian asked, her voice polite, but her eyes narrowed. Zoe smiled and set out a cutting board to prepare a simple frittata. Yes. I wanted to have breakfast ready for us. I thought eggs and toast would be fine. There are some leftovers in the fridge, too, roasted zucchini and quinoa salad. I can heat that for lunch. And if you'd like, I'll whip up a smoothie. Vivian tilted her head. You spent $35? She leaned in, scanning the items. Almond milk and eggs, okay. But was there any sale? Because that seems lower than usual. Zoe's cheeks flushed slightly. I've been watching coupons and store ads online. I go on Tuesdays so I can get a 15% discount. Plus, I use a store membership card that helps cut costs. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. Since she expected to foot occasional bills, electricity, water, internet, she planned to contribute. But Zoe insisted the grocery shopping was her personal responsibility. While Vivian admired the initiative, something felt off. The last thing she needed was a freeloading house guest. Or worse, someone hiding real work behind a facade of scrimping. Very resourceful, Vivian replied coolly, taking the seat at the small breakfast table. She watched as Zoe whisked eggs into an omelet. Just keep sharing what you find. I'm curious how you manage that discount thing. Zoe's shoulders relaxed a bit. I'm happy to show you the app. There's a neat coupon for buying in-season produce. The zucchini was only 79 cents a squash. Vivian nodded, scanning the back of the almond milk carton. She pursed her lips. All right. She toyed with her teaspoon. How did your family lose the house? You mentioned Beaumont. The hurricane. Was it Hurricane Laura last August? Zoe's face fell. Yes. I lived in Beaumont with my parents until they passed away the previous winter. my mother from a lengthy illness, my father in a car accident. But they still had the house. When Laura made landfall, it flooded entire neighborhoods. The house was condemned. I sold every heirloom furniture piece I had on Craigslist just to pay my insurance deductible. Now I'm down to almost nothing. Vivian's expression softened for just a moment. I'm sorry for your losses. She cleared her throat. You said you're graduating soon? Zoe nodded, plating a small portion of frittata and setting it in front of Vivian. 10 days from now. Then I'll start job hunting, marketing assistant probably. I need to build a portfolio with local nonprofits. I can't afford to live in Austin any longer. As Zoe moved around the kitchen, Vivian studied her quietly. Yes, the arrival of an orphaned friend of her grandson was noble. Yet, for reasons she could not fully articulate, Vivian felt an unsettled energy around Zoe, an almost imperceptible undercurrent that made her skin prickle. Over the next week, Zoe threw herself into her new responsibilities, preparing meals for all 3 Reed residents, doing light housekeeping, and walking the small terrier, Luna, around the Montrose neighborhood each evening. She seemed punctual, polite, and even-handed in chores. Yet whenever Vivian glanced at Zoe's wardrobe, she noticed it was minimal: 2 pairs of well-worn jeans, a handful of neutral tops, all of which Harper had practically given her off the guest house rack. No sign of leftover sentimental clothing. And though Zoe claimed to shop exclusively on Tuesdays, Vivian discovered a bank notification alerting her to a Snapshot mobile payment at a boutique that sold designer sneakers, an unexpected expense for someone supposedly living on borrowed time. This revelation came one afternoon when Vivian glanced at the app on her phone while waiting in the car to pick up Jackson from a board meeting. The notification read, Snapshot, $220 charge. Vivian's brows shot up. She replayed Zoe's explanation, I live off coupons. And yet, here was a 4-figure charge, more than Zoe's entire first-week grocery bill, coming from a high-end sneaker store in Rice Village. Vivian's heart pounded. She debated confronting Zoe immediately, but decided to gather more evidence first. That evening, she quietly observed Zoe up close. At 6 p.m., Zoe emerged from the Montrose house, dressed in faded black leggings and a gray hoodie. She walked at a brisk pace for 2 blocks before turning the corner onto Westheimer Road. Vivian's car, discreetly parked, followed at a distance. Zoe ducked into a store called Elite Fit Athletics, selected a pair of limited-edition leather sneakers, then exited minutes later with a small bag. The purchase had totaled exactly $220. $40, lower than advertised, thanks to a limited-time store discount, but still far beyond grocery coupons. Vivian felt a surge of betrayal. Why was Zoe hiding purchases like this? If she could afford designer shoes, why claim to depend on charity? Vivian drove home, mind racing. When she arrived, Zoe was already in the kitchen making dinner, spaghetti with homemade marinara. She stirred the sauce with an ease that suggested she'd been cooking at home for years. Vivian forced calm. Zoe, dear, welcome home. She set down her purse and slid her phone into her pocket. I noticed you went to Elite Fit Athletics this afternoon. Zoe froze, her spoon suspended over a pot of boiling water. She turned slowly, meeting Vivian's gaze.
Oh, yes.
I found a discount code last week. They had that limited edition release and the boots, or actually slip-on sneakers, sorry, that match my old duffel bag. I've been eyeing them for months. In the middle of grocery shopping, you spent over $200 on sneakers? Vivian's tone was steady, but edged with disappointment. That doesn't align with living off coupons. Zoe set the spoon down and wiped a hand on her apron. Sorry, Vivian. I didn't want to worry you with my finances. My aunt passed me a small inheritance. Mom's side of the family has some savings set aside for me. I used part of that for the shoes. I felt it was time I had something comfortable for my walks and campus job fairs. Everything I said about coupons was true about groceries. I didn't think it mattered if I spent some money on something small now and then. Vivian's expression softened slightly, but she crossed her arms. I see. But if you have extra money, why not be transparent? Every dollar counts when you're a guest here. If you can afford matters beyond groceries, let's be open about it. Zoe nodded, cheeks flushing. You're right. I should have told you. I just didn't want to inconvenience anyone. My priorities were to keep you from worrying. Vivian took a slow breath, letting her anger ease. I understand. Just keep me informed. This is a shared home. I expect honesty. If you need to buy groceries, wrappers, or sneakers, let me know. We can discuss how to make it work. Zoe exhaled, relief and remorse mingling on her face. I promise. Transparency from now on. For the first time since moving in, Vivian felt a glimmer of trust returning. Later that night, Vivian lingered on the porch with Jackson, sharing the discovery. Jackson frowned, concerned. I'll talk to Zoe tomorrow. Make sure she isn't straining herself with extra spending. I want her to feel welcome, but not uncomfortable. Vivian nodded, sipping her chamomile tea. I don't want to punish her. I just want to ensure we're clear about finances. It's not fair for me, or for Harper, or for Jackson, to absorb unforeseen costs. Jackson set down his mug. Understood. I'll handle it. He wrapped an arm around Vivian's shoulders. Thanks for looking out for our family. Vivian leaned into him, easing into the warmth. She's a good kid. I just want her to feel it, too. 2 days later, Jackson invited Zoe into his father's study, Jonathan's old office, redolent of leather and mahogany. Zoe looked nervous, standing stiffly as Jackson offered a seat. Zoe, Jackson began gently. How are you settling in? Any challenges approaching graduation? Zoe clasped her hands together. I appreciate everything. I've been applying to marketing assistant positions at local nonprofits, like Houston Food Trust and Green Thumb Recycling. I'm hoping to land something by May. Jackson nodded. That sounds promising.
He paused.
There's one minor thing I'd like to address. Your purchase at Elite Fit Athletics. Vivian approached me because she was concerned. You said you had inherited money and used part of it for the shoes. I just want to confirm that's accurate so we can all be on the same page. Zoe's shoulders relaxed, relief washing over her face. Yes, that's right. I'm sorry for not being upfront. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. You and Harper and Vivian have been so generous already. Jackson softened. We're happy to help. But if you have a budget, let us know. For example, you could contribute a portion of your inheritance toward groceries or utilities. We don't need you to scrub floors if you're working, but having clarity helps. Zoe nodded vigorously. Absolutely. Starting today, I'll give you a detailed budget. I should have done it from the beginning. Jackson offered a small smile.
Good.
That way, we can avoid misunderstandings. You're part of this household now, and we want you to feel both supported and respected. Zoe's eyes brimmed. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. As Zoe left the study, Jackson exhaled and closed the door. He replayed every word, grateful that the conversation had been constructive. He walked down the hallway, stepping into Vivian's sitting room. Mom, Zoe's going to share her budget, Jackson announced. She wants to contribute. Vivian, seated in her favorite high-backed armchair, nodded.
I'm pleased.
It's good to see her respond with honesty. Now we can focus on helping her get a job, so she can move into her own place soon. Jackson perched on the edge of the ottoman. Exactly. And if that happens, we'll all be that much better for it. But let's not forget, Zoe's not just a temporary house guest, she's family. Miles sees her as a sister. We treat her that way. Vivian's lips curved into a small smile.
Yes.
I'll adjust accordingly. She folded her hands in her lap. Thank you for handling that, Jackson. Over the next week, Zoe adhered to the new arrangement. She contributed $40 to groceries weekly, covering staples like eggs, bread, and produce. She outlined her limited inheritance budget, earmarking $500 each month for essentials beyond groceries, school supplies, work attire, and the occasional necessity. She kept receipts meticulously and shared them every Sunday night with Vivian. Vivian, for her part, eased up on the kitchen vigilance. She stopped tallying every almond milk purchase and let Zoe choose ingredients freely as long as the totals remained within the agreed budget. The day-to-day chores, laundry, vacuuming common areas, walking Luna, Zoe did them without complaint. Each evening, she sat up late crafting cover letters and resumes, determined to secure a post-graduation position. By the end of the week, Vivian found herself offering Zoe coupons she clipped from local print circulars. Try this 3-for-1 pasta sale at Midtown Market. Good until Thursday. Zoe's eyes lit up. Thank you, Vivian. That helps a lot. Vivian rose from her recliner and patted Zoe's shoulder. Glad to see her making it work. She retreated to the kitchen to steep another pot of chamomile tea. One Saturday afternoon, Miles drove up from UT Austin for a weekend break. He stepped out of his Jeep, carrying a stack of textbooks, and spotted Zoe sitting on the patio, earbuds in, fiercely typing into her laptop. Moonlight gleamed off the wisteria above them as Zoe's fingers flew across the keyboard. Miles. Zoe sprang to her feet, hugging him fiercely. Thank you so much for connecting me with that recruiter at the Houston Green Collective. They want me to interview next Tuesday. Miles grinned. That's awesome, Zay. I knew you'd ace it. He hugged her again, then turned to wave at Vivian, who peeked out the French doors with a small smile. Vivian stepped onto the patio. Congratulations, Zoe. I'm proud of you. Zoe beamed. Thank you, Vivian. She glanced at Miles. I'm so grateful to both of you. This place feels like home already. Inside, Jackson arrived home from a late board meeting at Azarinist. He walked past the open patio doors, hearing Zoe's laughter as she and Miles reminisced about campus life. He stood just beyond the threshold, watching them. The sight was strangely comforting. His wife building her business across state lines, his mother embracing a new daughter, and his brother forging his own path. Jackson stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Harper's waist as she emerged from the guest house. Did I choose the right family? Harper, carrying a stack of freshly pressed jeans meant for shipping back to Dallas, leaned into him. Absolutely. It's complicated, but it works. Everyone's pitching in, and Zoe's going to land that job. Once she's settled, life will be that much smoother. Jackson kissed the top of her head. I don't know how you manage it all. Harper laughed softly. Some days I don't manage it. Some days I barely survive. But seeing everyone in one place, getting along, it reminds me why I wanted this life. As dusk settled over the Montrose house, the Reed family's disparate lives, Dallas beauty entrepreneurs, Austin college students, and a Montrose matriarch, intersected in unexpected harmony. Zoe's presence, once viewed as a potential burden, had become a testament to the household's evolving dynamics, a blending of compassion, accountability, and a shared commitment to each other's success. Vivian's initial reservations had gradually given way to cautious optimism, while Zoe's determination revealed that transparency and hard work could mend uneasy beginnings. In the days to come, the Reed home would face more tests, Harper's continuous travel, Jackson's corporate pressures, Miles's final exams. But for now, as the faint glow of street lamps illuminated the wisteria blooms, the household thrived on mutual respect. Each member, no matter how different their needs or backgrounds, contributed to the living tapestry that was the Reed family. And that was more than enough to keep the peace, at least for the moment. The mid-morning Houston sun filtered through the Montrose home's living room windows, casting golden patterns on the Persian rug. Vivian Reed sat stiffly on the sofa, her posture unyielding as she watched Harper Reed, her daughter-in-law, approach carrying a stack of Petal and Glow catalogs in one arm and her smartphone in the other. A fresh breeze drifted in from the open French doors, carrying the scent of honeysuckle that climbed the trellis outside. Good morning, Vivian, Harper greeted with her characteristic warmth, setting the catalogs on a coffee table. I've been reviewing our promotional calendar. These catalogs need to go up by Friday if we want to time the campaign with the new lip gloss release. Vivian's expression was cool as she folded her hands in her lap. That's all well and good, Harper. But tomorrow is the full moon festival, Ram. As the head of this household, I expect you to prepare the ancestral altar offerings yourself. Harper paused mid-swipe on her smartphone. Vivian, I understand the importance of honoring traditions, but I'm in the middle of finalizing logistics for our VIP launch in Dallas. Flights, guest lists, live stream setup. It's a massive undertaking. If I schedule it for you, would that be okay? Vivian rose, smoothing her tailored silk blouse. No, that's not okay. The ceremony must be done properly. Your grandmother taught us that if the offerings aren't prepared by the person who presides over the household, the ancestors may grow displeased. You've been living here for 3 weeks. It's time you fulfill your duties. Harper set her phone face down on the coffee table and exhaled. She walked around the sofa and knelt in front of Vivian. I respect your mother's memory, and I want our family to feel honored. But scheduling a catering service to prepare the entire mam-kung is more efficient. They're experts at ancestral offerings, fresh fruits, fragrant incense, prepared sticky rice cakes. It would take me all of today just to shop for items, never mind cook and arrange everything by sunset. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You're asking me to trust a stranger with something my mother held dear.
No.
I need to see your hands making those offerings. It's a matter of family integrity. Harper's fingers twitched. She loved tradition and had grown up helping her own grandmother prepare offerings each quarter. But she was also painfully aware of her corporation's deadlines. Harper had promised to unveil the new Crystal Charm lip gloss before Memorial Day sales. The difference of a few days could cost the company thousands of pre-orders. Vivian, Harper said, her tone firm but respectful, I have obligations I cannot postpone. Rosa is coordinating the models, Janelle has scheduled the live stream rehearsals, and Gabe needs my final approval for packaging designs. If I step away to spend 6 hours at the temple. Your company waits for no one, Vivian interjected. So you'd rather let your business suffer than uphold your place in this family? I find that unacceptable. Harper swallowed. No, that's not what I mean. But going to the temple, shopping for ingredients, cooking sticky rice, incense, fruits, those things take time. From store opening at 9 a.m. to actually setting up the altar, it's at least 6 hours total. I can't be in 2 places at once. Vivian's mouth twisted. That is precisely the problem. You treat this not like your second home, but like a hotel. My late husband's lineage deserves proper respect. I will not compromise on this. Jackson stepped out of his study. Sensing the rising tension, he rubbed the back of his neck, shoulders tight. Mom, what's going on? Vivian pivoted toward him. Jackson, your wife refuses to prepare the ram offerings herself. She expects me to let a catering service do it. Jackson's eyes flickered between Vivian and Harper. Harper, is that true? Harper rose to her feet. Jackson, Her voice cut off as she tried to gather her thoughts. I want to honor the tradition, but I'm trying to keep Petal and Glow on schedule. If I let go of Dallas for a day, I risk missing our launch deadline. Jackson's face tightened. He looked at Vivian. Mom, this is important to Harper's career. The Dallas launch is a big deal. He turned to Harper. Can you maybe shift the offering to early morning like dawn? You could get to the temple before sunrise and be back here by noon. That would leave you the afternoon to handle work. Harper's eyes brightened marginally, brain scheming. That's feasible, Jackson. If I can leave by 4:30 a.m., the store won't need my input until after 1 p.m. With Dallas being 1 hour behind, Vivian interrupted.
No.
The offerings must be prepared at precisely sunset. It's been that way for generations. The sun sets at 7:45 p.m. tomorrow. It's not a religious obligation you can compress into a 4-hour window at dawn. Harper felt her chest tighten, frustration pooling in her stomach. The conflict wasn't just about scheduling. It was about what each of them valued. She nodded quietly, eyes brimming. I see. In that case, she paused, biting her lower lip.
I'm sorry, Vivian.
I can't do it. Vivian's gaze sharpened. So you refuse? Harper inhaled sharply, resolute.
Yes.
I refuse to spend my entire day preoccupied with tasks that a professional service can handle in a fraction of the time. I'd rather. She exhaled and squared her shoulders. I'd rather go live in Dallas full-time than neglect my business for a ritual you insist I perform, Jackson. Vivian's face flushed with anger. How dare you? Wait, Jackson interjected quickly, stepping between them. Let's not escalate. Harper, there has to be a compromise. You care about this family. No, Harper said, her voice trembling but steady. I care about this family. I cannot keep sacrificing my business to meet outdated expectations. I love you, Vivian. But if you can't trust me to honor my obligations in my own way, then perhaps it's best that I move into my own place. Vivian's expression flickered with disbelief. Are you seriously telling me you want to move out? Jackson ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. Harper. Harper shook her head. I can't keep splitting myself in two. Petal and Glow needs me. If I'm only here to be your daughter-in-law performing ancestral ceremonies at sundown, we'll both end up too resentful. So yes, Vivian interrupted, her voice cold. Don't do this, Harper. But I am, Harper said quietly, chilly resolve in her eyes. If you believe that a luxuriously appointed home in Montrose requires me to abandon my passion and career every full moon, then we're not the right fit. I love Jackson, and I treasure this family, but not at the cost of my life's work. Jackson stared at Harper, shock and pain mingling in his gaze. Harper, please. It's over, Harper replied, taking a step back. She picked up her smartphone and catalogs. I'll tell Rosa I'm moving back to Dallas. Rosa, Gabe, Julio, they'll be thrilled. I'll still help with Azarinus Remote when I can, but I can't live like this. Vivian's face paled, outrage replaced by anguish.
Fine.
Leave then. See if you can find another family who respects your every whim. Harper's eyes stung. Her lips trembled. That's not what I mean. She turned and walked briskly through the living room toward the front door. When she hesitated at the threshold, she glanced back, tears unbidden glinting in her eyes. I gave this my best.
I'm sorry.
Jackson bolted after her, catching up just outside on the porch. He placed a hand on her arm. Harper, please don't go. Vivian watched from the doorway, arms folded tightly across her chest. The evening light caressed her features, illuminating the sharp lines of betrayal etched on her face. Jackson squeezed Harper's arm, his own eyes reddening. He turned to face his mother. Mom, can we talk about this? Not now. Let's calm down. Vivian met his gaze evenly. There's nothing more to discuss. With that, she closed the front door, leaving Jackson and Harper standing on the brick steps. Jackson looked at Harper, pain evident. I'm sorry, love. I should have talked to you earlier. Harper pressed both hands to her forehead, tears spilling. Jackson, I love you. But I can't be torn apart every time there's a tradition. I need to be true to my craft. He reached for her, pulling her into a desperate embrace. I know. I'll talk to her. I'll try to change her mind. Harper buried her face in his chest. I don't want to spend my life negotiating seating arrangements and ancestral rights. It's too much. Jackson held her tightly. Hold on. We'll find a way through this. I promise. They stood on the steps, arms wrapped around each other, the gentle hum of evening cicadas rising in the distance. Inside, through the closed door, Vivian's silhouette remained unmoving, her posture as resolute as the marble bust of her late husband back in the study. The Montrose home felt momentarily hollow, its walls echoing the fragile fractures forming in the Reed family's carefully arranged tapestry. Harper wiped her cheek and whispered, I don't know if there's any fixing this. Jackson guided her hands away from his shirt and looked her in the eyes. We'll make it work. I love you. We'll find a new approach, one that honors both our worlds. As the cicadas swelled, Harper let her head fall against Jackson's chest, uncertainty mingling with hope. Deep down, she knew she needed to stand up for herself, but she also feared shattering what they had built. And as dusk settled over Montrose Boulevard, the Reed family's next chapter hung in the balance. Would they rebuild the bridges they'd just burned, or would the splintered pieces drift apart forever? After Harper's ultimatum and abrupt departure, the Montrose home felt hollow. Vivian did her best to revive the routines she and Jonathan had once shared, but something fundamental had shifted. Jackson Reed awoke each morning to the sputter of the coffee maker and the quiet hum of air conditioning, but no longer heard Harper's soft voice coordinating Petal and Glow's Dallas operations. Miles was away at UT Austin in the final weeks before graduation, busy with capstone projects and studying for final exams. That left Jackson alone with his mother, Vivian, and Zoe Parker, the young orphaned friend of Miles whom Vivian had reluctantly agreed to take in. In the first week after Harper left, Jackson's routine was mechanical. Wake before dawn. Sip coffee from a silver-rimmed china cup in the kitchen while scrolling through Azarinist's overnight sales figures. Head to the Montrose guesthouse office for morning Zoom calls with his marketing team and the board of directors. Spend the afternoon reviewing production forecasts for the next bird's nest shipment. And return home by early evening, hoping for a semblance of solace in family dinner. But with Harper gone, none of it held the same warmth. Vivian, steely and reserved, kept a low profile, quietly supervising Zoe's efforts to learn the house's rhythms, dusting shelves, preparing meals, walking Luna the terrier around the block. It was in this breathless emptiness that Jackson first noticed Zoe's presence in ways he had never paid attention to before. One afternoon, after an especially long video conference with Azarinist's board about scaling up their floral infusion line, Jackson returned home just before sunset. The late afternoon light slanted through the French doors, illuminating the living room in warm honey tones. Jackson set his suit jacket on the back of a chair and padded barefoot across the Persian rug, calling a hello into the kitchen. No one answered. He followed the echo into the adjoining sunroom, where he found Zoe perched on a wicker chair, sipping herbal tea. "Welcome home," she said, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. Zoe wore dark leggings and a charcoal blouse, simple, unremarkable, but Jackson suddenly noticed the gentle curve of her collarbone. Luna, the terrier, padded around Jackson's ankles and emitted a happy bark. Zoe offered Jackson a shy smile. How was New York? She knew Jackson had spent 3 days at a trade show in Manhattan presenting Azarinist's latest product innovations. Informative and exhausting, Jackson replied, lowering himself into a chair opposite her. He noted the fine-line artistry of the porcelain teacup, the way Zoe held it with both hands, sipping so carefully that steam curled around her ivory skin. He realized that he'd been missing the sound of human company outside of corporate boardrooms. "How are you settling in? Anything you need?" Zoe set down her teacup lightly.
"I'm adjusting.
I applied to 3 local nonprofits, Houston Community Gardens, Bayou Greenways, Texas Urban Harvest, and I have an interview Thursday at one of them." Relief flickered across her face at Jackson's interest. "Thank you for letting me stay here while I get on my feet." Jackson leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Of course. Your family now, part of this household. I want you to succeed." He studied her for a moment, remembering Miles's fond stories, how Zoe played basketball, how she'd started a small blog about sustainable living back in Beaumont before the hurricane. Zoe had ambition, something Jackson admired deeply. As they talked about Zoe's job prospects, Jackson noticed how congenial she was, warm laughter that bubbled up unforced, bright eyes that seldom dropped below his gaze. He realized he hadn't felt at ease like this since before marrying Harper, when he and Miles used to stroll along Galveston Bay, fishing poles in hand, no corporate responsibilities in sight. Something about Zoe's presence made him pause his endless to-do lists and actually breathe. Over the next few days, their rapport deepened. Jackson would return from long Azarinist meetings to find Zoe typing cover letters at the sunlit writing desk in their shared common space. He'd watch her perfect phrasing about sustainable campaign proposals, finger quotes around community gardens, before landing on just the right turn of phrase. He found himself offering small suggestions, maybe open with your campus volunteer work to grab attention. She looked up from her laptop, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you. That's so helpful." Jackson realized he wasn't just mentoring, he was savoring every moment he spent with Zoe. One Wednesday evening, Jackson found himself engrossed in a financial forecast for Azarena's next quarter when Zoe knocked softly on his office door. She held a manila envelope. "Mr. Reed, Jackson, would you mind looking over these notes on my interview strategy?"
Ide prosiatan feedback.
Jackson set aside his spreadsheets and patted an empty chair. "Absolutely."
Come in.
Zoe sat and slid the envelope across the mahogany desk. Inside were 6 pages of typed bullet points, strengths to highlight, salary research, possible questions about philanthropy. As Jackson read, he realized Zoe's preparation surpassed many of his own staff. He offered tactful edits and encouraged her to emphasize her fundraising track record. Across the desk, Zoe watched him, her posture unguarded. Jackson sensed her vulnerability, a young woman, freshly orphaned, trying to climb a new ladder in life. He admired her bravery. When she finished speaking, as he set down the pages, he said, "You'll do great. They'd be lucky to have you." Zoe's cheeks colored. She bit her lower lip, a nervous tick. "I hope so. I want to be independent, contribute to this household, not just be a drain on resources." Jackson leaned back, meeting her gaze. "You already contribute more than you know. Help with dinners, household tasks, but I know you'd rather have a job that's yours. I'll call your interviewer and let them know to expect someone exceptional." Zoe's eyes shimmered with gratitude. "Thank you. You have no idea what that means to me." That night, after Jackson retreated to the guest house for a restless sleep filled with spreadsheets and mutual fund analyses, Zoe lay awake in her borrowed bedroom. She stared at the lace-curtained window, pondering how Jackson's kindness had felt like sunlight in a sky that had been cloudy for years. A week later, on a humid Friday, Jackson found himself alone in the Montrose driveway at 10:45 a.m., tapping his foot against the polished leather of his Oxford dress shoes. He was scheduled to show Zoe a model unit in Victor Suites, a sleek new development in Midtown known for its floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop pool, and valet parking. Zoe had called him the previous evening, mentioning, somewhat shyly, that she had secured a temporary internship at a corporate sustainability firm downtown, starting the following week. She wanted to look at affordable rental options in Midtown to save commuting time. Jackson nodded to himself, pulling his cell phone from his pocket. He texted Zoe, "I'm here to pick you up." Minutes later, Zoe emerged from the Montrose foyer, dressed in dark skinny jeans, a forest green button-down blouse, and low-heeled ankle boots. Jackson's breath caught. Zoe had always dressed simply. But today, something about the way the blouse hugged her frame highlighted the gentle curve of her neckline. He cleared his throat. "Ready?" Zoe smiled, a light flush on her cheeks. "Ready." She carried a leather tote the color of caramel. They drove in Jackson's black Lexus sedan, weaving through Montrose and onto Main Street. Zoe chatted about her internship duties, cataloging rooftop garden yields, coordinating recycling initiatives with local restaurants, and helping plan a community composting workshop. Jackson, while listening closely, noticed the way Zoe's lips curved when she laughed, the grace with which she shifted in her seat. He realized she was no longer just Miles's roommate. It felt as though she'd become indispensable to the household's equilibrium. 15 minutes later, they pulled up to Victor Suites, a gleaming 30-story tower of glass and steel. As they stepped out, the mid-morning glare bounced off the building's reflective facade. A valet took Jackson's keys, and they entered the grand marble lobby, where a concierge named Celeste greeted them with a practiced smile. Celeste led them to a sleek silver elevator, summoning it with a gentle wave of her hand. They ascended 3 floors to Unit 3B, a corner apartment with an expansive view of downtown skyline. When the doors opened, Zoe stepped into a spacious living area flooded with natural light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an uninterrupted view of Houston's jagged skyline, the Wells Fargo Plaza, Bank of America Center, and the distant glimmer of the Texas Medical Center buildings. Polished hardwood floors reflected the glow of overhead recessed lighting. "Stunning," Zoe whispered, stepping onto the balcony that wrapped around 2 sides. The breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby rooftop garden. Jackson watched her. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. Rents for $1,950 a month, utilities included. I can help you with the application if you'd like. Zoe soaked in the scene, her eyes bright. Jackson, it's incredible. How did you even find out about this place? Jackson offered a small grin. My assistant knows a leasing agent here. It's safe, convenient, everything you asked for. Zoe turned to him, and in that moment, Jackson's heart skipped. She wore a burgundy scarf casually draped around her neck, and her dark hair fell effortlessly around her shoulders. She smiled at him as though he had solved a long-held problem, and Jackson, feeling oddly lightheaded, said, I'm glad you like it. They walked back into the living room. Zoe ran her fingers along the quartz countertop of the kitchen island. If I take a roommate, maybe I could split costs, but I'd prefer a place just for me. She paused, biting her lip. This is more than I hoped for. Jackson's gaze lingered on Zoe. I'll get you the paperwork. Should we head back to your internship office? You said you had some orientation this afternoon, right? Zoe nodded.
Yeah.
They want me to start a sustainability audit of their rooftop garden project at 3 p.m. I'll ride with you if that's okay. They left Victor's Suites in silence. Zoe's satisfaction contrasted with Jackson's internal conflict. On the drive back to Montrose, Zoe spoke animatedly about environmentally friendly fertilizers, rooftop rain collection systems, and how she could improve the firm's carbon footprint. Jackson nodded but struggled to focus. Every time he glanced at Zoe's profile, he noticed new details. The way her blouse loosely draped, the curve of her jaw when she laughed. He realized he was no longer looking at Miles's roommate. He was looking at a young woman brimming with resolve, and for some inexplicable reason, the thought of her sharing this unit, potentially a home of her own, struck him as both exhilarating and terrifying. Later that evening, after Jackson dropped Zoe off at her temporary office, he returned home. The Montrose driveway felt empty when he stepped inside. Luna padded up to him, wiggling at his legs. He scratched behind her ears, but his thoughts churned. Should he feel guilty for the way Zoe's presence fluttered in his chest? He shook his head, as if to dislodge the feeling. When he sank into the living room armchair, Vivian was already seated, reading a leather-bound travel memoir. How was the apartment? She asked without looking up. Jackson hesitated. Zoe loved it. She's going to apply. Vivian closed the book and set it on her lap. That's good. She seems dedicated. I appreciate you helping her. Jackson nodded, but he couldn't relax. That night, after Vivian retreated to her bedroom, Jackson sat at his desk in the guest house, reviewing Azarinist's fiscal statements, but his mind kept drifting back to Zoe. He noticed that he'd been picking out new clothes, shirts with slimmer fits, slacks with a crease he hadn't worn in years. He'd never thought clothes mattered that much, but now, as he rifled through his closet, selecting an iron maroon button-down to wear to dinner, he wondered if just a new shirt could make him appear more appealing. On Saturday, Jackson found himself alone once more. Zoe had an early interview downtown. Vivian was volunteering at the Houston Food Trust's weekend food distribution. Jackson cleaned his apartment. The guest house felt far too empty. He straightened a stack of legal pads on the desk, wiped fingerprints from a framed photograph of Vivian and Jonathan on their wedding day, and finally, by late afternoon, climbed into a shower and dressed for the evening. At 6:30 p.m., Jackson headed out to Mid-Montrose's newest gastropub, the Honeycomb. It was smart casual, no suits, just dress shirts and dark jeans. As he walked in, a tall, auburn-haired bartender named Simone waved from behind the gleaming countertop. Jackson slid onto a chalkboard-marked bar stool and ordered a Negroni. He stirred the drink, frowned at the amber swirl, and sighed. The bartender raised an eyebrow as if she recognized his tension. At 7 p.m., Zoe arrived, jaw-length dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, wearing a blouse in deep sapphire and black trousers that accentuated her slender figure. She waved, smiling brightly. Jackson felt his pulse quicken. Jackson, she said, sliding onto the bar stool beside him. Thanks for meeting me. I snagged a shift waiting tables tonight. She touched the embroidered name tag pinned above her left breast that read, Zoe Parker. I wanted to catch up before heading in. Jackson nodded, signaling for 2 waters. How'd the interview go? Zoe's face lit up. It went well. They invited me back for a second round on Tuesday. They asked insightful questions about grant writing, donor relations, social media strategies for community gardens. It felt like a genuine conversation. Jackson tapped his glass gently. Congratulations. I'm proud of you. Zoe's cheeks flushed. Thank you. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The overhead lights cast a soft glow, making her eyes appear more luminescent than any presentation board could display. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Jackson sipped his water, noticing Zoe's delicate collarbone as her blouse slipped just slightly off one shoulder. He cleared his throat. I wanted to show you a place. Zoe laughed, brushing a hand through her hair. We. As if cued by some invisible conductor, Zoe's shift manager, a burly man in an apron emblazoned with a honeycomb's hexagonal logo, called from the other end of the bar. Zoe. Table 14 needs drinks refilled. Zoe gave Jackson an apologetic look. Duty calls. She hopped off the stool. I'll be back in 30 minutes? Jackson nodded, but as Zoe moved away, he felt a sudden impulse, an urge to see her specifically for himself rather than secondhand through Maya's recommended offices or Miles's campus anecdotes. The other diners and clinking glasses faded into a blur as he watched Zoe's hips sway with quiet confidence. When Zoe returned from her first shift, carrying a fresh iced tea in a mason jar, Jackson realized his heart pounded more than usual. They found a high-top table in the back corner, shaded by a dim amber lamp. Jackson told her about Azarina's upcoming distribution event at the Houston Urban Market and asked if she'd like to attend as a special guest. Zoe's interest in community sustainability made this a perfect networking opportunity. Zoe set down the iced tea, her eyes alight. I'd love that. As they talked, Jackson noticed how Zoe's laughter, light, unaffected, draped over his evening like a warm blanket. She reached across the table to brush crumbs from his forehead, a simple gesture, so innocent. Yet it ignited something in him he couldn't ignore. Dinner concluded. Zoe wiped off her apron, and they stepped into the humid night. The streets glowed with neon signs, food trucks parked curbside, the low drone of passing traffic, distant laughter. Jackson offered to escort Zoe home. They strolled together beneath the southern magnolias lining the streets, and Jackson found himself reaching for her hand. Zoe hesitated, but didn't pull away. The moment her fingers brushed his, he felt a spark, a jolt that made his pulse race. Just steps from Montrose, in the golden halo of a street lamp, Jackson stopped. Zoe faced him. Jackson, I. Before she could finish, Jackson leaned forward and kissed her. It was electric, her lips soft, her breath warm. Zoe's eyes widened in surprise, then closed against his. They stood locked together for a heartbeat that felt like 10 seconds. When they parted, Zoe's cheeks were flushed. We shouldn't, Zoe whispered, stepping back. Jackson exhaled.
I'm sorry.
Sure, Zoe said, placing a finger gently against his lips. Jackson froze as she reached behind her back, slipping off her cardigan. Beneath it, she wore a tank top cut low in the front, exposing more skin than Jackson had ever seen outside a family gathering. Zoe's breathing was ragged, chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. She reached out a hand and brushed it across the collar of Jackson's shirt. When Jackson lowered his hand, she took his collar gently in her fingers, guiding him slightly forward. He felt a tremor in his chest, some combination of desire and guilt. He closed his eyes as Zoe's lips met his again, soft at first. Then, with growing intensity, her tongue pressing against his, seeking warmth and connection. Jackson's restraint melted. He wrapped an arm around Zoe's waist as she leaned into him. They became 2 silhouettes in the street lamp's glow, lips moving in an intimate dance of discovery. Zoe's hand slid across Jackson's back, drawing him closer. His free hand rose to cradle the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her dark hair. In that moment, Jackson felt a sense of release he hadn't known he'd been missing, a sense that, for a single breath, the pressures of corporate leadership, the heartbreak of losing Harper, and the heavy expectations of Vivian evaporated. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Zoe's eyes fluttered open. She gazed up at him with a mix of astonishment and longing. Jackson steadied himself, breath caught in his throat. We can't repeat that," Zoe said, voice soft but firm. This feels dangerous." Jackson swallowed, his voice husky. "I know. I shouldn't have done that." She nodded. "Not tonight. Not here. Please. Don't." Zoe pressed a finger to his lips. "But you can come up." Jackson hesitated, torn between desire and caution. Zoe's invitation hung in the humid air, tempting and fraught. Finally, he followed as she led the way to Victor's suite's parking garage. They shared a silent elevator ride up to the 14th floor. Zoe fumbled nervously with her card key, unlocking the door to her furnished corporate apartment. Inside, the unit's ambient lighting bathed the room in a soft glow. Zoe closed the door behind them, leaning against it as though gathering courage. She wore only slim black leggings and a fitted camisole. Jackson's pulse thumped in his ears. He noticed the faint scent of jasmine lingering from Zoe's shampoo. Their eyes met, and without a word, Jackson crossed the room. He lifted Zoe onto the edge of the kitchen counter, tucking her legs around his waist. She pressed her palms against his chest as he leaned in. Their kisses were urgent now, filled with a mixture of excitement and guilt, excited by the novelty of forbidden passion, guilty because every fiber of their upbringing told them this was wrong. Jackson's hands traveled down Zoe's back, roaming the soft fabric of her camisole. Zoe threaded her fingers through Jackson's hair, urging him closer. He felt the smooth skin at the back of her neck, the soft curve of her shoulders. Zoe gasped as he gently tugged at the hem of her camisole, and suddenly, they were both shivering. But then, a faint click reached them. The elevator doors below opened. Zoe's gaze flicked toward the hallway. "We have to stop," she whispered, panic rising. She pushed Jackson away, stumbling off the counter. He backed up, guilt flooding every nerve. Zoe retrieved her cardigan, pulling it on hastily as she caught her breath. "This can't happen again," she said, fumbling for words. "I can't be your affair." Jackson swallowed, heart pounding. I know. I'm sorry." Zoe's eyes glistened with regret. "I shouldn't have." Jackson stepped forward, cupping her face. "It wasn't you." He steadied himself, reaching for her hand. "I was lonely. I didn't mean to hurt you or anyone, but I can't deny how I feel." Zoe shook her head, tears brimming. "You're married." "I know. It's over with Harper. She left, remember?" Jackson's voice cracked with conflicting emotions. "But that doesn't excuse me. I shouldn't be doing this, especially not with you." Zoe's lips trembled. She took a deep breath, eyes flickering with trauma and longing. "I need to leave." She hurried to the door, but Jackson gently grasped her arm. "Wait." Zoe slipped from his grasp and shouted, "Please." She opened the door and fled down the hallway, leaving Jackson standing alone in the half-lit apartment, the smell of his aftershave lingering in the air. When Jackson returned home that night, the Montrose house felt impossibly quiet. He walked through the living room in near darkness, listening for any sign of activity. Vivian's bedroom door was closed, so he headed to his guest house. The weight of what had just happened, his betrayal of Harper's memory, his transgression with Zoe, pressed down on him like a physical force. He sat at his desk, head in his hands, marveling at how quickly loneliness had warped into temptation. The day's events replayed in his mind, how Zoe's laughter filled the Montrose study, how her presence had felt like a balm for his wounded spirit, how he had crossed a line he could never uncross. Back in her own Victor Suites unit, Zoe remained unsettled. She changed out of the clothes she'd worn, discarding the camisole, and collapsed onto her mattress. Moonlight filtered through blinds, casting striped reflections on the wall. She covered her face with both hands, overwhelmed by guilt and confusion. She cared deeply for Miles, Harper's former sister-in-law, and Jackson's mother, Vivian. Yet in the span of 2 hours, she had allowed herself to be seduced by Jackson's loneliness and her own yearning for validation. Zoe exhaled, allowing tears to slip down her cheeks. In the darkness of her temporary apartment, she realized the gravity of what they had done. A married man and a 25-year-old orphaned friend, consumed by a whirlwind of desire. She whispered to the silent room, "What have I done?" Miles came home late. He'd extended his final study session at the library and found Zoe's door ajar. He gently knocked and opened it. Zoe sat on the edge of her bed, shoulders hunched, eyes red. Without words, Miles sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her. Zoe leaned against him, letting sobs catch in her throat. Miles stroked her hair. "Talk to me. Whatever it is, I'll help." Zoe blinked back tears. "Jackson, Miles closed his eyes, the pieces clicking into place. "You and Jackson?" Zoe shook her head. "Please, don't tell Jackson's mother." "I can't. There's too much at stake." Miles sighed, hugging her tighter. "I understand. But you need to figure out what you want. This can't continue." As they sat in the dimly lit apartment, both considered the unthinkable consequences. If word leaked, Vivian would banish Zoe from the Montrose home. Jackson could face the end of his marriage and perhaps lose his position at Azarinist if scandal emerged. Miles's diploma and job prospects might be overshadowed by rumors of family betrayal. And in any scenario, no one would escape unscathed. That night, under a sky both clouded and glowing with city lights, Jackson and Zoe's secret had emerged from the loneliness of a troubled household. Each was left to grapple with conflicting emotions: guilt, desire, grief, for a choice that could either shatter them or forge an unexpected bond. And neither could be certain whether their clandestine moment beneath a street lamp would bind them closer or tear the remaining Reed family seams irreparably. Harper Reed sat alone in her Dallas apartment late Wednesday evening, stretched out on the sectional sofa, her phone's soft glow painting her face an icy blue. She'd spent the day resolving last-minute details for Petal and Glow's Friday launch, approving final print proofs, double-checking shipping confirmations, and responding to influencer inquiries.
Now,
exhaustion pressed on her eyelids. She was scrolling through Instagram when her phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Unknown, Simone the Honeycomb. I don't usually do this, but I thought you should know. Just saw Jackson and Zoe checking into Victor Suites, room 1205, around 5:45 p.m. Thought you'd want a heads up. Be careful." Harper froze. Her heart hammered as shock rattled through her chest.
Simone?
The Honeycomb was the gastropub where Jackson and Zoe had met just days earlier. She replayed every detail, the way Zoe's presence made Jackson's shoulders relax, the brief flash of desire they'd shared on the sidewalk under that street lamp. Denial kicked in first. Perhaps Simone had misread them saying goodbye in the lobby. Maybe they weren't alone. But as she inhaled and reread the message, Harper's chest tightened. Room 1205. That was exactly the room they'd toured, one of Victor Suites' showcase one-bedroom model apartments. The date was Wednesday, just hours ago. Simone's text could only mean one thing. Jackson and Zoe were together in that unit, likely alone. That heads-up was more than casual advice. It was a warning. Harper's mind spun. Over the past week, tensions at the Montrose house had been palpable. After she'd left to return to Dallas, Jackson had become more withdrawn, and Zoe more self-assured. Harper had assumed they were simply getting on with daily routines, Zoe job hunting and Jackson burying himself in Azarinist's next quarterly fiscal plan. But the combination of Simone's message and the reality of their intimacy struck her like a freight train. She shoved aside her phone. There was no time to second-guess. Within seconds, she was on the phone with her assistant, Rosa Delgado. "Rosa, cancel my morning flight to Houston. Instead, book me on the 7 p.m. direct to Hobby Airport," Harper ordered, voice trembling. "I need to go there now." Yes, today. And get me Victor Sweet's address and any access instructions to room 1205. I want to be on site before 9. Rosa hesitated. Harper, Wednesday night? That's going to be tough. Flights are almost sold out. Do it anyway, Harper snapped, refusing to entertain further objections. She slammed down the phone, grabbed her car keys from the coffee table, and dashed out of the apartment. In Houston, Vivian Reed had spent her day feigning calm. She'd booked a rose gold manicure earlier, taken an afternoon walk to the nearby arboretum, and sipped jasmine tea in her living room, anything to avoid thinking about how empty the house felt without Harper. She'd returned at dusk to discover Zoe's familiar knock on her bedroom door. Zoe had reported landing a second interview for the Houston Urban Harvest internship. Vivian had offered polite congratulations, but her mind had wandered. She had a lingering inkling that Jackson's grief over Harper's departure wasn't limited to disappointment. Something in Jackson's demeanor felt off. Around 6:30 p.m., Vivian heard footsteps in the foyer. Zoe returned from her first shift as a gastropub server, earbuds in place. As Zoe set down her serving tray by the door, Vivian watched her slip into a slim black tank top and dark leggings. She sensed Zoe's gratitude for shelter, meals, and emotional support, but an undercurrent of anxiety pulsed through the younger woman's posture. Shortly afterward, Jackson arrived home, floppy-haired and wearing a crisp navy blue shirt. He greeted Vivian politely, his eyes betraying a shadow of guilt she'd never seen before. "Dinner's almost ready," Vivian said. Zoe nodded from the corner, eyes dipped to the floor. Jackson nodded absently.
I'm starving.
But he barely touched the omelet Vivian had prepared. After a few strained minutes of small talk, he excused himself to his guesthouse office, leaving Vivian with Zoe. The terrier, Luna, lay curled by the doorway, whimpering softly at Zoe's approach. "Zoe," Vivian said gently, "would you mind walking Luna? I think she's ready." Zoe mustered a small smile. Of course. But as Zoe and Luna slipped out onto the front porch, Vivian's mind accompanied them. She watched them move down the driveway, noting how Zoe held Luna's leash with a steady hand. She noticed the slight depression at the very top of Zoe's collarbone where the tank top strove to hide. For a moment, compassion flickered in Vivian's eyes. Beneath that, though, was wariness born of Simone's warning. At 8:45 p.m., Harper burst into Houston's William P. Hobby Airport like a whirlwind. Rosa's team had scrambled, finding a last-minute seat on a small Embraer jet that landed 10 minutes ago. Harper's suitcase thudded onto the carousel. She grabbed it and bolted out. In her Tesla, she activated the navigation to Victor Sweet's 512 Main Street, then punched in 1205 as a waypoint. The drive across Loop 610 and over the S. Loop East exit should take about 30 minutes, if traffic cooperated. Once she exited onto Main Street, Victor Sweet's loomed ahead, a 30-story glass tower, its facade reflecting city lights. The valet attendant, wearing a sharp navy suit, directed her to the underground parking garage. Harper clicked the overhead locker to credit her room number, then strode toward the elevators. 1205, she murmured, pressing her lips together as she pressed the corresponding button. The elevator glided up, floor numbers lighting sequentially. Harper's hands trembled, her knuckles widening as she gripped her purse. She rehearsed every possible scenario. If Jackson and Zoe were together, would she scream? Confront Zoe? Confront Jackson? She took a shaky breath. Harper's anger flared just thinking about how Jackson had lied. But beneath that, grief stung. She had loved him. A jumble of betrayal and sorrow made her heart ache. When she stepped out onto the floor, Harper moved into a dimly lit corridor lined with platinum-gray carpeting. The hallway lights flickered faintly in an odd pattern, perhaps a maintenance glitch, or a prelude to something darker. She crossed to Unit 1205, her footsteps echoing ominously. There was no need to knock. Instead, she pressed her palm against the brushed steel door. It swung open silently, revealing a softly lit living room. Her breath caught as she saw Jackson Reed reclining on a cream leather sofa, Zoe draped across his lap thigh. Goosebumps rose on her skin at the sight. Jackson's shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, exposing the first dark hair of his chest. Zoe's tank top had slipped off one shoulder, unveiling more skin in the low light than common courtesy allowed. Jackson's had lolled to the side, eyes half closed. He seemed intoxicated, either by the expensive wine bottle on the coffee table or by the moment itself. Zoe's lips hovered near his neck, her dark hair falling in waves, partially blocking Jackson's face. He had one arm wrapped possessively around her waist, and her legs were bent at awkward angles as she nestled into the sofa's corner. Time slowed. The world felt distant beyond the lines of Jackson's sprawled form and Zoe's radiant skin. A wave of nausea swept through Harper, then an inferno of rage. She felt as though the air had been stolen from her lungs. "Harper," Jackson murmured groggily, shifting on the sofa. He seemed unaware Harper had spoken. Zoe's head snapped up. Zoe's eyes widened like a startled deer's. Zoe threw a silk throw over her bare shoulder. Her cheeks flushed as she slowly extricated herself from Jackson's lap. "Shit, Harper, shit," she gasped, lurching to her feet with an abrupt decisiveness. Jackson sat up fully, eyes wide in realization. He tried to steady himself. "Harper, this isn't what it looks like." Harper's voice cut through the haze, ice in her words. "Isn't it?" She stepped into the room, pain hammered behind every syllable, but her posture was tall, resolute. "Jackson, how long?" Zoe grabbed a corner of her tank top and yanked it over her shoulder head, scrambling to cover herself with the silk throw, but not before Harper's eyes caught another glimpse of the outline of her collarbone again, the smooth skin, the curve of her hips obscured by hasty movement. Zoe's vulnerability juxtaposed against her earlier confidence sparked a fleeting pity in Harper before she banished it. Jackson rose from the sofa, shirt slipping off one shoulder. "Harper, please." "Don't," Harper said, her voice steady, though tremors rippled through her. She turned to Zoe. "You stay out of this. You knew he was married. Miles's big sister really pulled it off, huh?" Zoe's face crumpled. She tilted her head downward, tears welling up. "I'm so sorry, Miss Reed. I didn't plan for this to happen. I get Kiara's internship." Jackson advanced toward Harper. "Harper, wait. Let me explain." Harper shook her head. "I know enough." She turned to the doorway, where the hallway lights cut across the room in long, sharp lines. The weight of living in a world that could shift so rapidly descended on her. "I'm done." Crash. The sound echoed behind her. Vivian Reed's stiletto heels pounded down the corridor, deliberate, relentless. She flung open the door into Unit 1205 with a force that rattled the frame. Hair pinned back, cheeks flushed with outrage, Vivian took in the tableau in a single instant. Her son's unbuttoned shirt, Zoe's bare shoulder draped in silk, the broken remains of Jackson's restraint. Vivian's voice was a low snarl. Jackson Clifton Reed, her full name, in use since he was a toddler, struck Jackson like a bolt. He turned toward her, fear and shame clouding his eyes. Vivian strode forward, anger radiating from every pore. You betrayed your wife after everything she's sacrificed for this family. And you," she whirled toward Zoe. "You disgusting opportunist. How dare you?" Zoe's tears spilled. She retreated, wrapping the silk throw around herself. Vivian lunged forward, her hand connecting with Zoe's cheek in a stinging slap. Zoe reeled, clutching her face. "Get away from him." Vivian's voice cracked with fury as she pulled her son's shirt from his shoulders, ripping it. Jackson recoiled, but Vivian pressed her hand to his chest, driving him backward toward the hallway. "You are a disgrace, both of you." Harper, frozen by the doorway, watched in stunned silence as her mother-in-law unleashed a torrent of anger upon Zoe. Vivian's hand came down again, hard, on Zoe's cheek, and Zoe sank to the floor, sobbing into her silk throw. Jackson knelt beside Zoe, gently pushing Vivian's hand away. "Mom, stop. Please." Vivian's eyes flicked to Jackson, narrow and furious. "Stay away from her." Then she pointed at Zoe. "You pack your things and leave now, before I call the cops." Zoe clambered to her feet, her legs trembling. She held the throw to her chest, tears streaking down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible. She stumbled out the door, as though propelled by fear, leaving behind her purse on the granite kitchen countertop. Vivian retreated a step, watching Zoe's silhouette disappear down the corridor, then turned back to her son. Jackson, shirt now half torn, knelt beside Zoe's abandoned purse. His eyes brimmed with guilt and confusion. He rose slowly, voice hollow. "Mom, it's not that simple." Vivian's expression was unyielding. She hugged herself, arms crossing in front of her chest. "Not simple? How dare you lie to me, to yourself, and to your wife?" She paused, breathing deeply in ragged gulps. "Harper sacrificed her career, her life in Dallas, moving here. And you throw it all away for this transient fling." Jackson's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant for any of this to happen." Harper advanced a step into the room, eyes rimmed with tears, jaw clenched. "I'm sorry, Jackson, too. I trusted you, totally. I left Dallas to be your wife, to be part of this family. I believed you loved me, but there's no excuse for what you did. I'm done pretending anything else." Jackson's face crumpled. "Harper, please." But Harper shook her head.
No.
"I want a divorce." Her voice trembled, fierce with heartbreak. She drew herself to her full height and cupped her trembling hands. "I want a divorce, Jackson. I'm filing for it first thing in the morning. I can't continue like this." Jackson's eyes widened, panic flooding his face. "Wait, divorce, really? I'll do anything." Harper took a slow breath, pressing her fingers against her temples.
No.
"We're done. You broke our vows. You betrayed me. I wish it hadn't gone this way. I wish things had been different. But I can't be a naive fool anymore." She brushed past Jackson's outstretched arm and turned to Vivian. "Thank you for telling me the truth." Vivian's face softened for a fleeting moment. "Harper, if there's anything I can do." Harper shook her head.
No, Vivian.
"Please just take care of yourself." Vivian stepped aside, allowing Harper to slip past her and out of room 1205.
Crash.
The door slammed shut, and a heavy silence fell over Victor's suite's hallway. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Jackson sank to the sofa, head in hands, as Vivian took one last, sorrowful glance at the door. With slow, painful steps, she followed Harper out, leaving Jackson to face the wreckage of his betrayal alone. Outside, in hallway 12, Harper paused to catch her breath. Through the corridor's muted lighting, she found Vivian standing by the elevator doors, arms wrapped around herself, tears glistening on her cheeks. Harper's shoulders trembled. Vivian turned at Harper's approach, eyes bright. She lifted a hand to Harper's cheek, stroking it gently. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." Harper bowed her head, closing her eyes. "Let's just go home." They stepped into the elevator together, Vivian on one side, Harper on the other. As the doors closed, the soft chime echoed through the empty hallway. In that confined steel box, two hearts held fractured pieces of love and loss. Jackson's fate, in business, family, and marriage, hung in the balance. Outside, the Texas night pressed in, Texas humidity heavy with unsaid regret. And somewhere beyond, Zoe rushed out of Victor's suites into the darkness, footsteps echoing in the corridor as though marking each broken promise that led them to this point. Harper Reed did not believe in fainting. Even as a teen, when she'd sprinted track for her high school team in Midland, Texas, exhaustion meant pushing through to cross the finish line, not collapsing onto the grass. But when Jackson's betrayal had been laid bare in that Victor Suites hallway, the shock had ripped through her like a tidal wave. She'd stumbled into an empty corridor, the weight of body and spirit giving way all at once. The next memory was disjointed, Harper's vision tilting at painful angles, a distant buzzing echoing in her ears, and the smell of antiseptic as she lay sprawled on Victor's suite's hard tile. Vivian Reed's panicked voice had broken through the haze. "Harper, Harper, wake up." A hotel security guard had arrived, followed by an urgent 911 dispatch. Ambulance lights spun red and blue through the elevator's reflective doors. Harper's breath had caught, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. The cut on her forehead where she'd struck the wall stung as they loaded her onto a stretcher. Through half-closed lids, she saw Jackson's face, stricken and pale, bent over her as paramedics secured the straps. Zoe's face loomed briefly at the edge of her vision before a paramedic gently nudged Zoe away. And then the world tilted black. Harper came to in a private room on the 7th floor of Houston Methodist Hospital. The soft hum of medical equipment and the dim glow of night lights formed her new reality. Her scalp throbbed where the paramedic had stapled a small bandage, and her entire body felt hollow, as if all the air had been knocked out of her lungs. She blinked against the fluorescent glare. The mattress trembled slightly, the rhythmic squeak of nearby nurses' shoes on linoleum floors punctuating the near silence. A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. She was lithe and wore bright lavender scrubs. "Ms. Reed, can you hear me?"
I'm Nurse Carter.
"How are you feeling?" "We administered a mild sedative for trauma. It should wear off soon." Harper's throat felt parched. "Water," she rasped. The nurse adjusted the four-pole and handed her a small plastic cup. Harper sipped gratefully, the cool liquid tracing a soothing path down her throat. Nurse Carter checked the vital signs on the monitor. Heart rate about 110, blood pressure a steady 120/78, temperature 98.6. But the nurse's expression shifted to curiosity. "We ran a quick series of blood tests, Ms. Reed. I know it's a lot to process at the moment, but Dr. Sanders should be in soon to discuss the results." Harper's gaze narrowed. Blood tests for what? Her pulse fluttered again, faster this time. The nurse nodded with understanding. "Just routine checks after head trauma. CBC, metabolic panel, and a pregnancy screen. Tell me, when was your last menstrual period?" Harper's mind spun. That detail felt inconsequential next to the enormity of betrayal. "About 6 weeks ago." The nurse's eyebrows lifted slightly. "All right. We'll wait on Dr. Sanders to confirm, but I'd advise you to rest. Anything else you need, just press the call button." Moments later, Dr. Lydia Sanders, a tall woman with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, knocked softly and entered, carrying a tablet. "Ms. Reed, I'm Dr. Sanders, one of the OB/GYN specialists on call tonight. I know you had quite a fall. We scanned your head, and fortunately, no intracranial bleeding was detected. You'll likely have a mild concussion, but otherwise, your brain is intact. How are you feeling?" Harper pressed a hand to her throbbing forehead.
Dizzy.
She hesitated. "Why did you run a pregnancy test?" Dr. Sanders hesitated, tapping through the tablet. "Your blood test came back positive for human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG. That's the pregnancy hormone. Since you mentioned your last period was roughly 6 weeks ago, it corresponds. We did a quick transvaginal ultrasound. I'm seeing a gestational sac, about 6 weeks along." Harper felt the room shift beneath her. 6 weeks. She was pregnant. The ache in her chest hurt more than the head trauma. I'm pregnant." Her voice broke. Dr. Sanders nodded gently. "I know this seems abrupt. We'll keep you comfortable. We'll monitor you for a few days to ensure the concussion isn't causing any complications for you or the pregnancy. But so far, the fetal heartbeat is present and strong at 6 weeks. I'd recommend you avoid any strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. No lifting, no sudden head movements." Harper closed her eyes, tears pricking. The faint glow of life inside her felt like a fragile ember in the blackness of betrayal and heartbreak. Jackson's face swam into her mind, how he'd crumpled when she demanded a divorce. Zoe's tearful confusion. And now this. Regardless of her emotional shock, the reality sank in. She carried Jackson's child. But that didn't erase his infidelity. She'd promised herself that she would never let him exploit her goodwill again. She needed to remain steadfast. After Dr. Sanders left, Nurse Carter dimmed the overhead light. Try to rest, Ms. Reed. We'll check on you again in an hour. Alone in the hush of her private room, Harper curled into the hospital bed's crisp sheets. Her body felt both foreign and familiar, a vessel for new life amid a storm of shattered trust. She clung to her phone, fingers trembling as she composed a message. Harper, Jackson, I'm in Houston Methodist. Please come.
I'm pregnant.
She pressed send, then put the phone down, staring at the ceiling as tears spilled down her cheeks. Jackson Reed's morning had begun with a simple goal: locate Harper and ensure she was safe. He'd spent the night pacing his guesthouse office, guilt gnawing at every fiber as he replayed their final confrontation. He'd called Zoe's phone multiple times, but she'd let the calls go straight to voicemail. By dawn, he'd taken himself off autopilot, found the hospital's number online, dialed repeatedly until Nurse Carter finally answered. She'd instructed him to come immediately. He'd gathered his suit jacket in a wrinkled heap, downing a hastily made strong black coffee before rushing out the door. Now he sat in the hospital's waiting area, cold tile pressing against his shoes. The hum of fluorescent lights and distant chatter formed a bleak soundtrack. At 8:30 a.m., Dr. Sanders emerged into the hallway. Mr. Reed? She asked, her tone gentle but urgent. Jackson rose, heart hammering. He followed her to Harper's room. Dr. Sanders paused at the partially open door. Jackson, I want you to hear this from me. Ms. Reed is stable. She has a mild concussion, no bleeding detected. But I want to be clear, she is 6 weeks pregnant. The heartbeat is strong and reassuring. We're going to monitor her for another 24 hours, just to ensure there's no delayed intracranial pressure. After that, she'll be discharged with strict rest orders. Jackson's knees felt weak. Thank you, doctor. Can I see her now? Dr. Sanders stepped aside. She's resting, but you may go in. Jackson entered Harper's room. The bed's white linens contrasted sharply with the shadow under Harper's eyes. She lay on her side, burrito wrapped in a pale blue hospital gown, arms curled into herself. A thin gauze bandage covered the cut on her forehead. Her eyelashes trembled, staining her cheeks with tears. Jackson pulled a chair to her bedside, grasping her hand as gently as though holding a fine crystal. Harper's eyes fluttered open, meeting his. He struggled to find words. Harper, he whispered, voice thick with anguish. I'm so sorry. Harper's gaze remained steady. 6 weeks, she said softly, eyes glistening. You've slept with my brother's roommate while I carried this child. Jackson swallowed hard. I know. I know. Harper squeezed the blanket between her fingers, face taut with a mingled sense of grief and fierce resolve. I want a divorce, she repeated, calmer this time. I'm having this baby. Whether you want to pay child support or not is up to you. Harper, please, let me go home. Take you to breakfast, talk this through. Harper shook her head.
No.
You go home. Let Vivian handle my discharge. I'll be back with a lawyer in Dallas to file.
I'm staying.
She inhaled, bracing herself. Human resource policies, custody, support, they'll sort themselves out. I know what I'm doing. Jackson's shoulders slumped. Is there any way to fix this? His voice, hoarse from sleepless nights, trembled. Harper's gaze sharpened. Not today. Maybe not ever. We are done, Jackson. Jackson's head bowed, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He closed his eyes, listening to Harper's steady breathing. Finally, he kissed her forehead. I'll help with anything you need, Harper. Child support, visitation, whatever. I'll do it. Harper's shoulder trembled. Thank you for that. Jackson lingered a moment, pressing his forehead against hers. Then, with a final tear glinting in his eye, he quietly left the room. In the hallway, Vivian Reed waited anxiously. When Jackson emerged, his face was ashen. Vivian guided him into a small conference room down the hall. How is she? Vivian asked, her voice trembling with worry. She's pregnant. 6 weeks along. Concussion's mild. Doctor says she'll recover, Jackson replied. Vivian blinked, as though reality was still crashing into her. A baby. She placed a hand over her heart. Oh, Jackson. He buried his face in his hands. She's filing for divorce. He raised his head, tears escaping his eyes. Vivian, I lost her. Vivian reached out and placed a hand on his back. She's pregnant, Jackson. A part of you lives on in that child. Jackson turned to her, anguish in his gaze. There's no us anymore.
She's moving on.
She wants a divorce. She's staying in Houston. Vivian's breath caught. Ms. Reed asked to handle the paperwork from Dallas? Why? Jackson exhaled. Because she wants to sign documents where she has community property rights. Texas is a community property state. She has every right to her half of everything. And I think she wants space from me. She needs to know this child has her mother's name on the birth certificate. Vivian's eyes filled. I would have thought we could talk, negotiate something. Jackson waved his hand in frustration. She's resolute. She won't see me as her partner, not anymore. I can't blame her. I know I deserve this. I ruined everything. Vivian gently clasped his arm. Your child needs you. If you step up, help Harper with medical bills, therapy, whatever she needs, perhaps she'll consider letting you be part of the baby's life. Jackson nodded, drying his eyes, and took a steadying breath. First thing tomorrow, I'll contact the attorney. I'll be a father. I'll do what's right. Harper was discharged from Houston Methodist the next morning, Vivian at her side. They entered the sunlit hospital lobby, the humidity pressing against them as though testing Harper's fragile condition. Zoe, pale and cradling her still sore cheek, stepped out to help Harper into the passenger seat. Jackson followed, halting at the foot of the wheelchair ramp. He met Harper's gaze. Harper offered a curt nod. She placed her hand on Zoe's arm. Thank you for staying with me, Zoe.
Zoe dipped her head.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Reed. Harper's gaze softened for a fraction. Take care of yourself. She settled into the seat, turning to Vivian. Let's go back to the Montrose house. Jackson watched the entire scene unfold, heart breaking with every passing second. As Harper's Lexus slipped away, Vivian approached Jackson, eyes gentle. She's strong, Vivian said quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're going to have to prove it every day from now on. Jackson exhaled, nodding. I will. That afternoon, beneath the live oak trees lining Montrose Boulevard, the Montrose house stood solemn and still. In her study, Vivian and Jackson sat before a low oak desk, consulting with attorney Laura Shields via video call. The contract wedding agreement, filled with legalese, lay open. Community property statutes, custody arrangements, and pupillary support clauses. Jackson's eyes flicked repeatedly to the framed wedding photograph of himself and Harper, smiling under an arched trellis in downtown Dallas. On the polished coffee table, a tiny pair of infant socks lay folded, Harper's idea, a tangible reminder of the life she carried. Jackson's cheeks twitched as he cleared his throat. Yes, that's fine with me. He clicked a few digital forms over Zoom until the attorney's approval popped up on screen. Vivian exhaled. It's done. Jackson's shoulders slumped with audible relief, mixed with despair. I never thought it would end like this. Attorney Shields' voice crackled through the speakers. The divorce will be final in 30 days, unless Ms. Reed decides otherwise. During this period, you'll be granted limited visitation, video calls until after the baby is born, and you'll be responsible for half the child's prenatal medical expenses. Child support will be calculated at 20% of your monthly gross income, per Houston regulations. Jackson nodded numbly. Understood. Vivian touched his hand, offering a small, sympathetic smile. Once the Zoom window closed, Jackson remained seated, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. His marriage was over. He was now legally bound to support the child he'd betrayed. Vivian cleared her throat. Get some rest. We'll handle things here. Jackson allowed himself a nod before standing. He moved to the window, pressing a hand to the cool glass. The setting sun cast long shadows on the manicured lawn, long shadows stretching the silhouettes of live oaks across gray brick. In the distance, High-rise buildings flickered with illuminated office lights preparing for the night shift. In the wings of his mind, Jackson replayed the warmth of Zoe's lips against his skin, the tender curve of Harper's belly at 6 weeks. He realized that in destroying his marriage, he risked losing everything: his wife, his family's respect, his place in the company. Yet the life inside Harper, his unborn child, offered him a final path toward redemption. In Dallas, Harper lay across her king-sized mattress, a laptop open to a folder labeled Divorce Papers, Final Draft. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through linen drapes. She gently placed a hand over her rounded abdomen, feelings of protectiveness blossoming. Her mind wandered to the life ahead: single motherhood, the challenges of raising a child whose father had broken his vows. But she knew she would be all right. She was strong, resourceful, and dedicated to building a nurturing environment for her baby. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. Launch went off without a hitch. Petal and Glow sold out the first 1,000 lip glosses in under 3 hours. Your team sends love. Call anytime. Harper allowed herself a small smile, then typed a reply. Thank you. I'll call you tomorrow. Then she set the phone down. Despite the betrayal, life circled forward. A new chapter awaited. She would face it alone but determined, with a living reminder of her love for Jackson growing inside her. Outside, the Texas sky shifted to lavender and rose. The world held both heartbreak and promise. And in that breadth of color, Harper Reed quietly gathered the shattered pieces of her past and prepared to build a new life for herself and the child she carried. 3 days after officially filing the divorce paperwork, Harper Reed arrived back in Dallas under an indigo dawn sky. A gentle breeze rippled the curtains of the one-bedroom condominium she had quietly leased in Uptown. The unit's floor-to-ceiling windows faced the glinting skyline, a stark contrast to the stately brick facade of Vivian's Montrose home that Harper would soon sell.
Now,
as she stepped into the sunlit living room, carefully balancing an expanding frame, Harper realized how crystal clear her priorities had become. She set her suitcase down and gently ran a hand along the curve of her abdomen. At 7 weeks pregnant, she could already feel subtle flutterings, a tiny heartbeat each morning sustaining her resolve. Everything in her life had changed. Her marriage was dissolved. Her company's operations transferred to a trusted team in Houston, and she was carving out a new routine entirely dedicated to her health and the life growing inside her. Early that morning, before even unpacking a single garment, Harper logged into her laptop. Her email inbox pages filled with congratulations from influencers, customer inquiries about Petal and Glow's limited edition Crystal Charm lip gloss, and a personal message from Rosa Delgado.
Rosa.
Good morning, boss. Congrats again on last week's launch. We're fully prepared to handle the next campaign. Take whatever time you need. I've scheduled Zoom check-ins 3 times a week, so you can stay looped in without pressure.
Get some rest.
Harper exhaled, a warm glow easing her tension. She clicked reply and typed, Thank you, Rosa. Your leadership means more than you know. I'll connect Monday. Enjoy a restful weekend. Then she closed her laptop, walked to the kitchenette, and poured herself a glass of water. This Denver lavender condo, with its modern white cabinetry and polished granite countertop, felt worlds away from the old Victorian moldings she had left behind in Houston. By mid-morning, the moving truck against the curb rumbled awake. A young duo from Swift Shift Movers carried boxes labeled books, kitchen supplies, and, painstakingly, baby things fragile. Harper directed the inventory with quiet precision, making sure her maternity pillows and prenatal vitamins were unpacked first. The movers packed away her high-heeled shoes and a section of the walk-in closet reserved for hospital bags and small dolls. In a corner of the living room, she arranged a cozy white glider and a changing table, pre-assembled per the safety manual's instructions. She pressed a soft, pastel mobile above it, knowing the day was drawing near when she would hear a real baby cry instead of merely imagining it. Late that afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the condo. Harper descended the stairs, one small step at a time, and descended onto the sidewalk. She wore a knee-length gray knit dress and a cashmere cardigan, the gentle morning chill lingering. She braced herself for a moment before Vivian emerged from the passenger side, bundled in a flowing cream coat and carrying a stack of pastel-colored baby blankets. Vivian approached with that same mixture of ice and warmth Harper remembered from childhood. No wasted words, yet eyes suffused with affection. "Hello, sweetheart," Vivian said, punctuating each word with a soft Tennessee Rose accent. She brushed her fingers over Harper's cheek as if to measure whether her daughter-in-law had truly grown fragile or simply stronger. "I sold the Montrose house this morning. Sold in under a week, can you believe it? I'll be here for as long as you need." Harper nodded, feeling both relieved and overwhelmed. "Thank you, Mom. I appreciate it." Vivian settled onto the glider she had placed in the corner, then unfolded a baby blanket, smoothing its edges. "Now we wait for little Eloise. She'll be here before you know it." Harper sank onto the love seat across from her mother, eyes brimming. "I'm nervous." She reached out and touched her abdomen. "Everything feels so fragile right now, from the divorce to this pregnancy. I'm brand new at being a mother, by myself." Vivian's gaze softened. "Honey, nobody's ever really ready. But you have a big heart, and I have faith we'll figure this out together. That's something." She pulled back, clearing her throat. "As for Petal and Glow, you did the right thing handing it over to Rosa. I sold my house because I want to be here for you, no more splitting time between Houston and Dallas. You have my full attention." That evening, after a light dinner of vegetable broth and soft whole wheat biscuits, Harper and Vivian watched the first Houston, Dallas live-streamed roundtable honoring Petal and Glow's success. Rosa moderating for an on-camera toast to headquarters. Harper typed a short message in the chat. "Thank you all. Sending hugs from Dallas." It felt good to know the company was thriving without her constant email checking. Over the next 2 weeks, Harper settled into her routine. Her doctor scheduled a follow-up ultrasound at 8 weeks, and she spent afternoons resting on the glider chair, reading parenting magazines and listening to guided meditation for prenatal health. She had delegated full operational authority to Rosa. Product development, influencer collaborations, social media schedules, everything. A final Zoom call with Rosa and mid-level management sealed the transfer, with Harper's voice calm and authoritative as she said, "Rosa, this is your ship to sail. I trust you completely. Just call me if an issue can't wait until Monday." Rosa's bright, "Yes, ma'am," filled Harper with both pride and wistful longing at what she was giving up. Vivian rearranged her life around Harper's needs. She enrolled in childbirth education classes in Oak Lawn and took a caregiving certification from a nearby community college, anything to ensure she could provide expert, loving support. In the mornings, she cooked soft-cooked eggs, oatmeal, and spinach smoothies, and by midday she'd knit small baby booties or sort through racks of neutral-tone onesies. She even found a local support group for first-time single mothers and invited Harper to join, noting quietly that perhaps Harper needed a sense of camaraderie beyond their mother-daughter bond. On a warm Saturday afternoon, as the sun's glow streamed through the south-facing windows and painted golden lines on pale wood floors, Dr. Sanders arrived for the 8-week ultrasound. Vivian watched in both fascination and awe as the grainy black-and-white image of Harper's uterus flickered onto the laptop screen set atop a small rolling table. "Dr. Sanders pointed out the flickering heartbeat, an image so small yet so miraculous. "There's our Eloise," Dr. Sanders said, placing a gloved hand gently over Harper's. "Everything looks perfect.
No visible complications.
Continue with your plan. Light exercise, balanced diet, and keep any stress minimal." Harper's eyes brimmed with gratitude. "Thank you, doctor," she whispered as Dr. Sanders slipped out, leaving her and Vivian alone with the image of their unborn child. That evening, Harper and Vivian shared a quiet dinner in the condo's dining nook, a small round table by the window. Harper reached for Vivian's hand. "Thank you for selling Houston and being here. I know it hasn't been easy." Vivian's fingers squeezed Harper's. "You mean more to me than any house or corporate legacy." My priority is you and your daughter now. Harper nodded, eyes watering. I feel lucky to have you. She paused, then placed her other hand gently over her abdomen. I think maybe this is the chance I needed to forge a new path. A fresh start. Over the ensuing weeks, mother and daughter fell into a comfortable routine. Prenatal yoga classes on Saturdays, visits to the Dallas Farmers Market on Sundays for fresh produce, and afternoons spent preparing the nursery in the den, a pastel space with a white crib, a soft gray rug, and a mobile of drifting lavender and gold stars. Vivian installed a gleaming changing table and lined it with plush towels, while Harper hung framed prints of coral reefs and gentle whales on the walls, images chosen to evoke calm and wonder. On December 3rd, at 2:14 a.m., Harper awoke from a deep sleep to a gentle tightening in her lower abdomen. She sat up, supporting herself against the crisp, white duvet. "Mom," she whispered, voice trembling. Vivian sat up on the fold-out couch bed, already dressed in slippers and a warm robe. "I think it's time," Harper said, her voice shaky but determined. Vivian moved to her side, slipping an arm around her. Together, they called their chosen obstetrician on call, who advised them to head to Baylor University Medical Center immediately. Jackson received a text from Vivian at 2:45 a.m. "It's happening. It's time. Please meet us at Baylor." He responded instantly, his heart hammering as he raced south on I-35. When they arrived at the hospital, the check-in process was brisk. Harper was admitted to a private labor room by 3:30 a.m., bright monitors tracking fetal heart rate and maternal contractions. Jackson appeared, pale-eyed but resolute, holding fresh linens and flowers. He knelt beside Harper's bed, taking her hand. "I'm here," he murmured, voice raw. Harper nodded, breath coming in slow waves. "Thank you for coming." Vivian stood beside Jackson, hand pressed gently to Harper's back as Dr. Nguyen, the on-call OB, checked her cervix. By 6:12 a.m., with a final push and a cascade of emotion, Eloise Margaret Reed arrived, a 7-pound, 4-ounce baby girl with a head full of dark hair and a cry that pierced the cool morning stillness. The minute Eloise's first breath fluttered in the air, Vivian's tears flowed freely. She knelt and pressed a kiss to Harper's forehead, then shifted to hold her granddaughter for the first time. Jackson and Harper exchanged a glance filled with awe and tentative hope. Despite everything, here at last was a miracle that transcended pain. Over the next 48 hours in the maternity ward, tensions gradually softened. Jackson visited hourly, helping change diapers and learning to swaddle Eloise under the watchful guidance of a kindly nurse named Ellen. Harper, weakened from labor but radiant, marveled at her daughter's tiny fingers as Jackson showed her how to put on the newborn onesie. Each day, Jackson contributed to the feeding rounds and diaper changes. With each passing minute, he strove to prove he could be the father his daughter needed, even if she would bear his ex's name. Vivian, confined for the moment to the hospital's guest suite, supplied nourishing chicken soup and baths for baby and mother alike. She crammed a Lebanese cookbook and a lightweight pram into her hospital cart, determined to build a bridge of trust with Harper. Each morning, she arrived with fresh-baked bran muffins and a plan to teach Harper how to make Eloise's burp cloths from monogrammed muslin. Under neon hospital lights, mother and daughter navigated their renewed, fragile bond, space for regrets, forgiveness, and a shared allegiance to Eloise's well-being. The day before discharge, Dr. Nguyen visited, holding baby Eloise in her arms. "Ms. Reed," she said gently, "your bleeding has subsided. Baby is gaining weight nicely. Everything looks perfect. You should be cleared to go home." Harper exhaled a long breath. "Thank you so much." Dr. Nguyen nodded. "Keep up with your postnatal checkups. And congratulations." As Harper took Eloise onto her hip, cradling her close, Vivian stroked Harper's hair. Jackson settled beside them, tears pricking his eyes as he watched the bond between mother and daughter, human, miraculous, fragile, gel in real time. That evening, the three of them, Vivian, Harper, and Eloise, walked through Clyde Warren Park, where live oak shadows danced on the paved pathways. Jackson followed at a respectful distance, watching his ex-wife and daughter taste unfamiliar air as a new family unit. Vivian paused, brushing a stray lock of ebony hair from Harper's face. "You're doing wonderfully," Vivian said softly. "I'm so proud." Harper smiled, pressing her lips against Eloise's forehead, tiny pink cheeks pressed to warm skin. "I'm learning," she whispered, "but having you makes all the difference." Vivian's eyes filled. "You'll never be alone." As Jackson trailed behind, he glimpsed the tender tableau. Mother and child nurtured in each other's arms, the grandmother's protective gaze, and the knowledge that, even despite the fracture that once shattered their family, they had found a way to earnestly begin again. The city's lights sprang on as dusk settled, each tiny spark a testament to new beginnings. Together, they walked into the night, an imperfect, evolving family, bound by love's second chance. A warm April breeze rustled through the pale green willow leaves lining the dirt drive of Carter Family Farm. At the crest of the hill, the land stretched out in gently rolling fields, legacies of golden wheat, emerald soybean patches, and a small grove of ancient pecan trees that had shaded the Carter children as they grew. In the early morning light, dew shimmered on the tall grasses. The farm's red barn, weathered but sturdy, stood like an old sentinel against the soft horizon. 58-year-old Amelia Carter paused beside the barn, brushing a strand of silver-streaked blonde hair from her face. She wore faded blue jeans, a plaid flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, and well-worn leather boots caked with soil. In her hands, she held a rusted tin bucket filled with fresh eggs gathered from the henhouse. Amelia inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp scent of loam and wildflowers. Here, surrounded by the land she'd inherited from her own parents, she felt the full weight of her responsibility. Amelia's two daughters, Emma, age 29, and Lily, age 25, were due at the farmhouse by 9 o'clock sharp. She had summoned them early that morning to reveal the final division of their 55-acre family farm, a decision she'd labored over for months. Each parcel represented far more than square footage. It contained memories of childhood summers, lessons taught under the grand oak tree, and the quiet triumphs that shaped the Carter family's fortunes over 3 generations. Amelia set the bucket of eggs on a wooden bench by the farmhouse porch as she scanned the horizon. Already, her eldest, Emma, rode up the drive in her silver SUV, window rolled down and soft folk music playing. Behind her, her youngest, Lily, stepped out of her compact hybrid, a tote bag slung over one shoulder, still bleary from the late-night shift she'd worked at the local co-op in Greenfield. As the sisters approached, Amelia tried to appear calm, but her heart fluttered at the gravity of the moment. She straightened her back and called out, "Morning, you two. I hope you're ready." Her voice wavered slightly, betraying her nerves. Emma, with her poised demeanor, nodded and stepped forward from her SUV. She brushed her hands against her linen skirt. "Morning, Ma," she said, smiling with confident ease. Her neatly styled hair and polished appearance contrasted with the rugged surroundings. She adjusted her scarf. "Coffee's ready, right?" Amelia offered a wan smile. "Just the way you like it, decaf with a splash of oat milk." Lily lingered by her car, adjusting her glasses. She wore a loose sweater and jeans, her auburn hair tied in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes hinted at exhaustion. She looked up at her sister, over whom she'd always felt a quiet competitiveness, and gave a curt nod. "I'll pass," Lily said.
I'm okay.
Amelia's chest tightened. There would be no sidestepping the conversation once they stepped into the shade of the porch. She tucked her hand into the pocket of her apron. "Come on inside." In the farmhouse kitchen, a pot of decaf coffee steamed beside a plate of fresh scones and homemade jam. The wallpaper, patterned with tiny daisies, had faded with time, but the farmhouse table, scarred by generations of Carter meals, remained sturdy. Amelia poured a cup for herself as her daughters settled onto the bench and a pair of wooden chairs. Emma accepted her mug with a grin. "Smells like home." Lily declined, her fingers fidgeting with a loose thread on her sleeve. I'm good, Ma. Amelia sat at the head of the table. She pressed her lips together before beginning. Girls, you know how much this farm means to me. Your grandparents poured their hearts into this land. I prayed for years for a third generation to carry it forward. She paused, scanning her daughters for any sign of understanding. I'm not as young as I used to be. My knees don't hold up like they did. So, I've decided how to divide the land. Emma straightened, setting the mug down. Ma, whatever you decide, I'm on board. Lily's jaw tightened. She leaned forward to meet her mother's gaze. Let's hear it then. Amelia took a slow breath. I've decided to allocate 35 acres to Emma and 20 acres to Lily. She exhaled. Emma, that includes the north field, the hay barn, and the old pecan grove. Lily, you'll have the south fields, the meadow by the creek, and the orchard. At her words, Emma's eyes brightened. She'd long admired the expansive north acreage. Thank you, Ma. That's more than I hoped for. Lily's lips pressed into a thin line. She folded her arms across her chest. Ma, I've been saving every penny from the co-op to invest in sustainable crops. Why 10 acres less than Emma? Her voice was calm, but edged with hurt. Amelia reached out and placed a hand over Lily's. Lily, your grandmother always said you had a gift for nurturing plants. You're better suited to manage the orchard and the creekside meadows, not the vast hay fields. I want you to have acreage you can transform into a permaculture garden, if that's what you choose. Emma leaned forward eagerly, oblivious to Lily's tension. I thought we divide it by age 3-to-2 ratio, right? Amelia nodded slowly. It's not just about rationing by age, darling. Think of your sister's vision. Lily's got a real talent for organic farming, like that community garden she's been planning since last fall. And you, Emma, you've always been drawn to the livestock side and the hay business. Lily's lips curled downward. I'm not saying I don't appreciate having some land, Ma, but I've been researching heirloom seeds and composting systems because I plan to grow specialty crops. She grimaced. Not just apples. Emma interjected quickly. We can work together, Lily. I'll cover the garden startup for my share of the hay profits. We can form a partnership. Lily glared at her. That's the problem, Emma. You're offering to fund me with your profits when you're getting 10 more acres. That doesn't seem fair. Amelia placed a firm hand on the table. Girls, I outlined the allocation carefully. I chose 35 for Emma and 20 for Lily because of the value and the different agricultural plans you each have. The north fields and hay barn will suit Emma's vision of livestock grazing, while Lily's 20 acres by the creek and orchard can support her sustainable farming projects. Together, you'd manage the irrigation system and share resources. Emma tossed her head, frustration surfacing. So basically, Lily gets to use the land that I'd sell off to build a modern farmhouse? Because that orchard's barely worth a fraction of the north field's hay yield. Lily's jaw clenched. Modern farmhouse? You want to turn our farmland into a boutique retreat? I thought this family was about growing food, not playing homesteader for Instagram. Emma took a deep breath, but her words were sharp. With 35 acres, I can sell off 15 to finance the farmhouse, far enough away that it won't disrupt the fields.
Meanwhile,
I'll keep the hay business going on the other 20. I'm not asking for permission, just letting everyone know that's the plan. Amelia stood up, urgency in her tone. Emma, you cannot sell prime farmland to build a farmhouse. This is sacred, our family's livelihood. Emma stood as well. I'm not selling the entirety, just 15 acres. The rest will remain agricultural. I've earned the right to build something that supports me, something I can call home. Lily's voice dropped to a low growl. You're selling off your inheritance to play lifestyle influencer. Meanwhile, I'm left with acres that flood each spring and yield half the harvest. Emma's lips twitched into a harsh grin. That's the risk you take choosing land by a creek. My land is flatter, more productive. Maybe if you'd worked as hard as I have, you'd realize that. Lily slammed her fist on the table, rattling the coffee mugs. Worked as hard? I work 10-hour shifts to fund my seed orders and soil tests. I don't get the same inheritance, so don't you dare imply I haven't earned my keep. The argument ricocheted between them, each sister unleashing careful barbs. Amelia placed her hands on their shoulders, urging them to calm down. But her voice couldn't soothe their anger. Years of unspoken envy and competition had fueled this confrontation. Finally, Emma pushed back from the table and glared at Lily.
Fine.
You want that orchard and those 20 acres, go ahead. But don't expect me to bail you out when the rains wash out your crops or the pests ruin your harvest. You'll have to fend for yourself. Lily stood abruptly, eyes blazing. You think I can't make that land work? You think I'll fail because I'm younger? Game on, sister. I'll turn that 20 acres into a thriving permaculture farm that outshines your damned hay fields. Before Amelia could intercede again, Lily stormed out of the kitchen. Soil still speckled on her boots. Emma, her expression hard, left moments later, her SUV door slamming so loudly the farmhouse windows trembled. Amelia sank into a chair, head in her hands. She stared at the scattered plate of scones, now cold and uneaten. The hush of the farmhouse felt cloying in the wake of her daughter's fury. That afternoon, Amelia walked the perimeter of the Carter property, trying to reclaim calm. She passed the pecan grove, leaves dappled by sun, remembering her late husband, Thomas, teaching the girls to climb those trees and shell nuts. She paused beneath the largest pecan, tracing her fingers along the rough bark. She whispered to the wind, "What have I done? How do I heal this?" Inside the farmhouse, the smell of cooking lentils and fresh cornbread filled the air. Amelia's best friend, Clara Simmons, had arrived to help her prepare a communal picnic for the annual Spring Harvest Festival. Clara propped open the screen door, noticing Amelia's hollow expression. "What happened, Amy?" Clara asked, placing a reassuring hand on her friend's shoulder. Amelia exhaled a shaky breath. "It's the girls. I gave Emma 35 acres, Lily 20, and now they're at each other's throats." She closed her eyes, recalling the earlier argument. "I thought I was making the right choice, balancing productivity with opportunity. But I didn't foresee how resentful Lily would be, or how entitled Emma felt." Clara glanced toward the backyard fields. Those two have always had a competitive streak. Remember how Emma used to outshine Lily at the county fair's baking contests? And Lily would sulk for days if Emma got more ribbons. Amelia's lips curved sadly. "I know. I thought they'd just roll with it, but I was wrong. Now Emma's talking about selling 15 acres to build some trendy farmhouse. And Lily's promising to turn her acreage into a permaculture paradise. Neither trusts the other." Clara patted Amelia's arm. "Well, you've still got time to mend this. Why don't you host a harvest dinner, invite the neighbors? Let them see the value of family over acreage." Amelia nodded slowly. Yes, I'll try. Tomorrow, we'll have everyone gather here for dinner, our farm friends, the neighbors, to remind them that this land was meant to bring us together, not tear us apart." That evening, as Amelia kneaded dough for cornbread, she prayed for wisdom. She heard footsteps on the back porch and turned to see Lily, arms folded, sunburnt face drawn with tension. She held a stack of permaculture designs. "Ma, I need some irrigation ditches dug by next week if I'm going to start planting cover crops," Lily said curtly. "I can't do it alone." Amelia set aside her mixing spoon. "I'll hire 2 extra hands to help. You focus on your plans, but let's talk about your share after that, okay?" Lily's scowl deepened. "If you won't put me on equal footing with Emma, I'll find another place to start my garden. I don't need family drama to choke me." Amelia's heart cracked. "Lily, please. I want you here. I'm sorry if I didn't explain myself well. Let's do this with cooperation." She motioned inside. "Come in and have some of this cornbread." Lily hesitated, then followed her into the kitchen. Amelia pulled out 2 stools at the counter. Lily sat heavily, her gaze flicking to the half-finished dough. Amelia slid warm cornbread onto her plate and poured herbal tea. "Listen," she began, voice gentle. "The Land-Division was based on sustainable planning, 20 acres near the creek to ensure your garden has water access, 35 acres on high ground for Emma's livestock. But maybe it's not perfect. I want to find a way to make this fair. Lily's eyes softened. She took a sip. It's just, Dad would have given us the whole farm to run together. He never would have split it up this way. Amelia exhaled. I know. He believed in unity. I was trying to honor that by giving you both land to build your futures, but I see now how it felt like I pitted you against each other. Lily chewed thoughtfully. I didn't mean to sound ungrateful. I just don't want to feel like a lesser daughter. If Emma gets 35 acres, that's pretty much half a farm to herself. I'm stuck with 20 that flood. Amelia nodded. What if we revise it? Emma, you keep 30 acres in the north field for hay and livestock, and sell 5 to fund that farmhouse project. Lily, you keep 25 acres, your creek land plus 5 acres of high ground next to my barn. That way you have additional dry land for your garden and compost systems. Does that sound more workable? Lily's eyes widened, slow relief softening her features. With 25 acres, I can set up a small rainwater harvesting system on the high ground for crop irrigation. That might work. And I still get the creek land for native plants. Amelia reached across the counter, squeezing her hand. Then it settled, unless Emma has objections. Lily nodded, her scowl replaced by the beginnings of a genuine smile. Thanks, Ma. I appreciate you listening. Amelia's gaze warmed. I'll call your sister tonight. We'll find a way to work this out together, like your dad would have wanted. The next evening, as twilight fell over the Carter farmhouse, the sisters sat side by side on the old porch swing. Sibling paltea. Emma, wearing a tailored blouse and jeans, craned her neck to watch the last pink rays cast gold over the fields. Lily, in a loose sweater and cargo pants, traced lines in the condensation on her glass. Amelia appeared at the screen door with a plate of fresh-baked cookies. Girls, let's talk. Emma and Lily set aside their glasses and stood. Amelia described the revised land division. Emma's 30 acres up north, Lily's 25 with the extra parcel. She offered Lily a small grant to help fund irrigation systems. Both sisters nodded, absorbing the terms. Emma squared her shoulders, meeting Lily's eye. I'm okay with that. 25 acres is more workable than 20. And 5 extra acres will help fund both my farmhouse and the equipment so you can get started. Lily nodded. I appreciate it. I'm sorry for how I reacted. It just felt unfair. Emma reached out, clasping Lily's shoulder. I get it. I have a lot to build. But that doesn't mean you can't build, too. We're sisters. I don't want that to change. Lily gave a half smile, the first in weeks. Thanks. I won't let you down. Amelia beamed, tears glistening. That's all I ever wanted, for you two to keep Dad's spirit alive, working this land together. Between them, the Carter sisters settled their differences as twilight deepened the sky. The barn's windows glowed amber as dusk approached, promising new beginnings. In that moment, the legacy of Carter Farm, the sweat of Amelia's back, the echoes of Thomas's laughter, the hopes of 2 daughters, felt safe once more. Beyond the farmhouse, fireflies emerged over the fields, weaving flickers of gold among the tall grass. In the hush of the Texas evening, Amelia watched her daughters reconcile, the earth beneath them brimming with possibility. And as she whispered a quiet blessing, she felt the Carter legacy breathe on, rooted in family, community, and the unyielding hope of tomorrow. By mid-July, the Carter farm had settled into a hopeful equilibrium. Chad's hydroponic greenhouse was thriving beside the creek, and Margaret felt a surge of pride whenever she glimpsed rows of lettuce and pepper seedlings reaching for the sun. Harper's granddaughter Eloise had already celebrated her 3rd month, and Vivian split her time between San Antonio's Botanical Institute, consulting on sustainable agriculture, and weekly visits to Dallas for Eloise's development checkups. The Carter legacy seemed secure, rooted in family, faith, and hard-won harmony. But for Brad Carter, age 30, this precarious peace stoked a new kind of restlessness. While Chad quietly managed his greenhouse and orchard, and Margaret planned a November harvest festival, Brad spent long evenings poring over state government websites. A small, wooden-framed home office he'd furnished in the farmhouse loft contained shelves of agricultural policy books, binders full of legislative notes, and a laptop perpetually logged into the Texas Department of Agriculture's public records portal. Brad's ambition had grown in the same soil that fed the Carter fields. From his teenage years, he'd lurked at county commissioner meetings, sat in on farm show panels, and cultivated a dream to become director of the State Department of Agriculture, wielding influence that could shape policy for Texas's 5 million acres of farmland. At 30, with nearly a decade of experience selling hay, managing cattle rotations, and leading volunteers in 4-H youth programs, Brad convinced himself he was ready. But he also knew that a political ascent required more than a solid resume. It demanded funding, endorsements, and the right connections. In early August, Brad approached Senator Evelyn McPherson, a conservative champion of rural issues whose sprawling ranch bordered the Carter property. He sat in her well-appointed den, leather chairs arranged around a polished mahogany conference table, and pressed his suit jacket, a navy pinstripe he'd bought for interviews, over his shoulders. Senator McPherson studied him with patient gray eyes. "Brad, I like your vision for supporting small farms, but political reality is messy," she said. "To get statewide support, you need donors, people who can cut checks to my re-election campaign and get you on the radar." Brad swallowed. "Senator, I can rally local committees, endorsements from county commissioners. I don't want to rely on a handful of big donors." "A handful of big donors is what you'll need," McPherson replied. $50,000 buys time and staff. It signals commitment. If you can raise it, I'll recommend you when the current director steps down. Brad spent the next week oscillating between hope and dread. Every ounce of his savings, combined with his livestock profits, totaled only $15,000. His modest one-story farmhouse mansion, constructed on 10 acres of the farm's high ground, had cost him $250,000. 5 years earlier, he'd refinanced to pay for construction, leaving little equity. To secure the rest of the funding, Brad approached his brother. It was a humid Sunday afternoon when Brad stood in Chad's greenhouse. Rows of ruby-red tomatoes glistened in the sunlight, and the faint hum of water pumps echoed against clear plastic walls. Chad wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag as Brad cleared his throat. "I need your help," Brad said, avoiding direct eye contact. "I've been offered a shot at becoming director of agriculture, but I need $50,000 for Senator McPherson's campaign fund." Chad's fingers tensed. "You know that's a lot of money, Brad. I can't just hand over my greenhouse profits. I have loan payments on the irrigation equipment." "I promise I'll pay you back in 6 months," Brad insisted. "Once I'm director, I'll manage state grants. I'll triple your investment. Trust me." In the end, brotherly bond swayed Chad. He signed a $50,000 promissory note, secured by his orchard, and handed Brad the check. Brad's relief was palpable. He treated Chad to celebratory barbecue that evening, and Chad forced a smile, though his heart pounded with unease. By late August, Brad donated the $50,000 to Senator McPherson's campaign. Within weeks, his name surfaced in local newspapers as her endorsed candidate for Director of Agriculture. Town hall supporters applauded his vision. County extension agents praised his leadership. He smiled for photos alongside McPherson, his arm draped over her shoulders. Yet beneath the public acclaim, an undercurrent of anxiety rippled through the Carter family. Margaret sensed something unsettled but chalked it up to the natural stresses of ambition. On September 3rd, 5 days before the election, the Texas Ethics Commission's quarterly report, published online, revealed an asterisk next to a large contribution, $50,000 donated by Carter Family Properties. But the disclosure also noted that agricultural corporations and family farms were prohibited from direct contributions to state office holders. Brad's donation violated multiple statutes on campaign finance, requiring contributions to come from individual personal funds or limited liability entities, not directly from family business accounts. By noon, the local newspaper had a front-page headline: Ethics scandal rocks candidate Carter. Campaign donation under scrutiny. Local TV news followed suit, investigating whether Brad knowingly concealed the source and broke campaign finance laws. The next morning, Senator McPherson withdrew her endorsement, stating publicly that she was profoundly disappointed in Brad's lack of due diligence. The Department of Agriculture's hiring committee immediately suspended its selection process until the Ethics Commission concluded its investigation. On September 7th, news cameras swarmed the Carter farmhouse. Brad attempted to address reporters from the porch, but the crowd shouted questions. Did you knowingly break campaign finance law? Are you going to resign your position in the Texas Young Farmers Association? When will you repay the $50,000 to your brother? Eventually, Brad stepped inside, shoulders stooped, and the cameras flickered off. Across the breakfast table that evening, Chad slid a copy of the Ethics Commission notice toward his brother. The notice demanded Brad return the $50,000 immediately and threatened hefty fines. Chad's voice trembled. You gave me false assurances. I can't lose the orchard. Brad's face fell. I didn't expect it to blow up so fast. I thought my family's name meant something. Everyone would understand that this is about what's best for the farm. I feel like I ruined us all. Margaret's expression remained calm, though her eyes brimmed with disappointment. The fines and legal fees are coming due next week. Your mansion equity won't be enough. Brad's lips tightened. Then I'll sell the house, whatever's left after the mortgage, and repay Chad. I might lose the truck, too, but because of me, Chad's orchard must survive. He spent that night drafting a for-sale flyer for his 10-acre estate, a 4-bedroom home with slate roof, panoramic views of the farm, and modern farmhouse amenities. The next morning, he placed it in the local real estate office's window. On September 15th, the Carter farmhouse echoed with measured footsteps. Margaret, Chad, and Brad sat around the kitchen table. The antiques clock on the wall chimed 2 o'clock as Brad placed the sold sign on the glossy flyer. The offer came through, Brad said quietly, folding his hands. I sold for $180,000. After realtor commissions and mortgage payoff, I have $30,000 in net. I'm giving it all to you, Chad. The remaining $20,000 I'll take a loan to cover. It's my responsibility. Chad's shoulders sagged. That covers the contribution, but not the $10,000 in penalties. They're scaling fines per violation, estimated at $10,000. Are you still going to take on that liability? Brad nodded. Yes. I'll sell the truck if I must. Then I'll move back into the farmhouse loft, take a part-time job at the barn, or as a farmhand. I'm done chasing titles. Margaret's voice was hushed but resolute. That's a start, son. But our family has weathered worse. We must stand together now. In the ensuing weeks, Brad moved out of his mansion to rent a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the nearby town of Sunnyside. He used the last of his savings to settle the Ethics Commission fines. The farmhouse loft, which he'd once outfitted with electronics and designer furnishings, became a simple bedroom with a narrow twin bed, a small dresser, and a single window facing the fields. Chad used the $30,000 to clear his orchard's irrigation channel, installing efficient drip lines for his hydroponic greenhouse and expanding his tilapia tanks beside the creek. He also quietly hired Brad to install the new piping and clean out the hillside reservoir, work Brad performed without complaint, dawn to dusk, in rough denim and boots. Margaret, relieved to see her sons side by side working the orchard, exhaled a long breath. The day before the first frost, she gathered the family around her in the barn loft. The wooden rafters glowed with warm lamplight as hay bales lined the walls. She poured cups of steaming apple cider and looked each of them in the eye. I'm proud of you both, she said, voice thick with emotion. No matter what you did in your youth, you found your way back. The Carter farm endures because we endure, brother and brother, mother and sons. Let's never forget that. Brad and Chad exchanged a glance, understanding and forgiveness passing between them. They raised their cider cups in a solemn toast. To Carter Farm, may it live on. When the first snowflakes fell that December, Margaret, Chad, and Brad stood at the barn door, watching the land grow pristine and white under the frosted pecan trees. The Carter legacy felt renewed, not built on ambition or scandal, but on forgiveness, humility, and the firm resolve of a family that had come full circle. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.